Welcome to SoundMindBeats podcast. We go live Tuesday, 8 a.m. Mountain Time, USA, every week. Please come and join us on TikTok. And in case you missed it, we're going to be uploading the full versions here on YouTube. Thank you for listening. What's up, everyone? I'm just getting ready for, we're doing an audio talk podcast today. I'm going to have a reference mix on here on TikTok. Goes by reference mix. That's the handle. There he is right there. And then we got Brandon joining and Mike Piazza. Brian?
What's up, dude?
How are you today?
I'm well. I've got my appropriate dad joke loading mug.
Cheers, my friend. Dad joke loading, huh?
Yeah, I don't even do a bunch of dad jokes, but apparently whatever joke I have for my kids that is never funny. So it's always like, oh, your dad jokes are so bad. Shut up. You don't know anything about comedy.
The pleasure of getting old, huh?
Oh, yeah. Nothing's ever cool anymore. So
yeah, exactly. My wife and I have been talking a lot about that. Like, as you age, how it's harder to get really enthusiastic and excited about things. It's
because your knees and your back start to hurt, and you're like, I gotta all your thoughts get distracted by that's
ow.
weird. I didn't do anything, but
Yep.
Why does my spleen feel like it's gonna rupture or something?
That is so true. It's funny actually. My wife and I have been training on the weekends because she has a desk job. Her office right above mine, and shoulders are tensing up, and she's like, help me loosen them up and whatnot. And it's just us talking about that, how pains literally change everything in life.
Yeah, I'm pushing into my second half century, and I still am trying to get workouts in a couple times a week. I'm definitely not pushing stuff as hard as I used to when I was younger and dumber. I've done all the damage possible, but it's now I'm still trying to be careful by twisting some weird way, putting a box onto a shelf. It's not even doing something heroic. I mean, if I'm gonna croak or get an injury, I want to do it in a super epic fashion. Not something oh, Dad, he passed because he's lifting a box onto the shelf into the garage.
Oh, true.
And it's
so true. Yeah, it's oh, how'd you hurt your knee? I don't know. I woke up from
yeah, totally. And it's just something. It's you. Hey, Mike, what's up, dude?
Yeah, it wasn't a shark attack.
I can feel this conversation.
Yeah, it's talking about the geezer stuff, but audio geezer. I went out Friday and Saturday, see a couple friends' bands here locally in Northern Virginia. And, I'm out there and it's you never realize it, when you're not playing. I mean, I sat in when both bands, but I wasn't mixing. And
right.
Oh my God, this is so loud.
Oh, God.
And I'm I'm a rock and roll dude, and I do big PA shows, and I'm oh, this is really harsh, and you're just sitting there trying to be yep, somebody else is mixing. It's not my gig today. To be that guy that comes up and can you pull 3 dB of 2.5K out? And it's it's a little woofy. Maybe it suck a little 300. Those guys are assholes.
I keep, a couple of years ago, I started keeping, I don't have my keys up here, but I have earplugs on my keychain.
Yeah,
and
same.
I haven't been to a show in years where I don't go to a ton of shows. My wife actually has made me go to more recently, which is nice. But when I go, we went to go see Usher. She wanted to go see Usher in Vegas at his residency before it ended last year.
Right.
So we went to Vegas, and anyway, beautiful. He was at the Dolby Theater, sounded amazing. Obviously, top of the line. I have my earplugs in the entire time. I won't go anywhere, even if I go to. God, we went to a bar probably 2 years ago now, and it was loud. I put my earplugs in. I use earplugs for everything now because everything is just too loud for me.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And it's a weird thing too that it is generally too loud.
Yeah.
What's up, Tutski? But it's I think about the physics sometimes, and I've been doing a bunch of these sort of small arena in shape, but 7,000-8,000 kind of seats, not a typical theater. And
But big though.
there's so much stuff you have to do to just get over the room noise and the crowd noise. Let's just say you've got the perfect band and there's no stage volume at all. You still have to do all this stuff to just get over. Yeah, I mean, I did a mixed Flow Rida last year, and that was another like loud ass show. There's no band. It was a DJ on stage, everybody on ears and wedges, and the stage volume was ridiculous. So it's like I've got to get the PA up over the artists, and people are like, "You're mixing too loud." I'm like, "What am I gonna do? Tell this dude who's making 300 grand a show to turn it down a little bit, you know?"
It works that way, unfortunately.
It's like, no, man. It's like, hey, that's how you want to perform. Cool. I just have to push the PA on top of it so people can hear, you know? And it's like, there you have it, you know? But there's like stuff like, you know, you'll see smaller shows and it'll be some loud, you know, it's always, it's like, it's either like snare drum or somebody's like Z mega hi-hats, or somebody brings out their 8x10 stack when you could like have done the gig on a combo amp, and it just, you got to mix around that one loud thing. You know, there's nothing you can do about it. Otherwise, then everybody in the crowd's just like, just getting their faces melted. And you're trying to like, I try to like always EQ it out to make it as smooth as it can be. But when you're doing like 110 dB plus, it doesn't matter how smooth it is.
You wear plugs, like you can't really wear earplugs when you're mixing, right? For the house.
Oh, dude, all the time.
Dude.
Like once I feel like I get it stable, I'll put plugs in, and then I'll pop them out just to kind of periodically check some stuff. Especially if it's like a group that I've worked with, and I know like, okay, here's a guitar solo coming up. I want to make sure that you're doing those little bumps as necessary. But yeah, I mean, especially if it's really loud, I'll be putting plugs in. And I've got like those Ultra phones they're like Sony drivers, but they're like jackhammer headphone kind of things that, you know, you see on a construction site or at a shooting range. Like I'll like mix it.
The airplane guys, like the
Yeah, totally. And it's just like, and for me with a bald head, I look like that dude from Empire Strikes Back in Cloud City, you know. But yeah, I mean, because I'll tell you, some of the live gigs, you know, and I was thinking about this over the weekend. It's like I gotta mix some shit this week, and I'm feeling like my ears are just getting annihilated, and that's like something, you know.
Yeah, tinnitus is like, I mean, we don't ever talk about that. I don't like talking about it, but
Yeah, it's coming for you.
Years, and some days it's really bad. Some days it's, you know, not as bad. But I get my ears checked every year. You know what I mean? And you know, I'm fine for the most part. I'm fine to work, but it's like, you know, I feel like the couple of years I spent in live sound, I didn't take care of my ears enough. So now I'm like, that's why I like earplugs, and you know, yeah, live sound can really mess you up.
I actually had a moment yesterday mixing where I don't know what it was. My ears, you just felt something off.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if it's age or just had a plug up or what it was. And like I'd listened to the mix this morning. I'm like, oh. And usually that doesn't happen to me, but yeah, yesterday was the day for me.
Yeah, it happens. I had a day like earlier, like this year, where I've just been really busy and I'm working a lot and doing a lot, and I don't listen loud for the most part, at least for long. And loud for me now in my room is like, you know, if I hit 90, I'm like, oh, which sounds I just don't like it. I just don't like it. And I had a day where it was just like, you know, I was working like 2 weeks straight without a day off, and it was just like everything just hurt my ears. Like even watching TV, and I was like, I just stopped at like a normal hour, and I was like, I'm gonna stop until tomorrow. And the next day I was fine. And it's like you hit those points, I feel like, where you kind of have to listen to yourself and listen to your body and your ears and be like, I need a break. Like I haven't, you know what I mean? Because even if you don't listen loud, we use our ears obviously more than anybody else, and we focus so much attention on them that, because you know, I go to the ENT every year just to get checked, and like even the doctor's like, you don't listen loud, but even listening at 80 every single day, that's still louder than the average person. So your ears are taking a hit, whether you feel it or want to believe it or not. So you know, it's not a fun conversation. It always gives me like the craziest anxiety to talk about this, but you know, it's real though, you know.
I wish I took your advice yesterday because, like, I actually I woke up this morning just all disappointed in myself. I'm like, man, that was yesterday was a waste. Like, I got to go and redo it all, you know. And it happens, that's for sure. I do remember I was at a show one time. I had to leave. It's just what you're talking about, like where like it literally was like I could feel it hurt my ears.
Yeah.
I'm like, I gotta leave. There's no way I can stay here. Like I gotta protect my ears. And that's like
Yeah.
that really is I think it's a critical conversation for engineers, especially in the younger, you know, your younger years.
Sure.
Yeah, like it's easy to neglect this and overlook it and not realize like you said that if you're listening to things loud every day, day in and day out, damage is being done. It's definitely
And like loud is subjective because you know you can be like because I was even talking to my ENT about it like last year, and she was like, "How loud are you listening?" And I was like, "I don't know. I'm probably around like 75 on average. Like I really, my room is big and it's treated pretty well. I mean decently, but like for some reason like 85 is really loud in here to me, right? It's not in mixed position. If I walk away, it's not. But that's about the average that they say is safe, right? 80, 85,
Right.
whatever. And so I'm like, yeah, I mix probably around like 75, you know, I'll maybe go up to like 90, maybe 95 for like a couple minutes. I'm like, but once or twice a day. And she's like, yeah, she's like, 75 to 80 doesn't seem loud. She's like, but if you do that every single day, consistently every single day, she's like, you take a hit. She's like, so you have to make sure you're, you know, giving yourself a break and so, especially like I remember before I was mixed, like before, I would say before I was in control of the volume now, which I am now. Like when you're recording with like producers and stuff every day, and artists, especially hip hop,
Turn it up.
Yep.
like yeah,
I want to
used
feel that
hate,
kick.
like, yeah, it's like anytime I'd work in like, which is every studio that I'd work at with like Offburgers, it was like the SSL was like at 11. You know what I mean? It's like it was the worst, and it sounded terrible, and you know, artists are like going deaf. They just don't realize it, but yeah, it's not a fun combo, but it's one that you know should be had every once in a while.
Yeah, I think I did serious damage to my ears through my band days. 'Cause, like I was a drinker back then, and so that kind of desensitizes the loudness, if you ask me.
It totally does.
Yeah,
Oh, it's good, guys.
Like, turn it up. Woo.
totally. turn it
Alcohol
up.
and drugs,
That's
you
what
don't
it
even
was
you
the
don't
whole
even
time.
realize it.
Yeah, and then standing right next to the drums. And like my pops used to come and hang with us, and he even told me he was like after 2 weeks, he's like, I got to get earplugs. It's like hurting my ears, and I know it for a fact. I did something to my left ear because it kind of bugs me every now and then. So yeah, I think this really does happen. Like to all of us if we continue doing it all the time.
Yeah, I had one client that I mixed for, and he's older, and he's a songwriter here in Nashville, and he's written for like old as in like he wrote like a Led Zeppelin song like years ago, right?
Oh wow.
His ears are very whatever you want to call them, worn in. But anyway,
Vintage.
every once in a while I would like do some mixing for him, and he came by one time to listen to the mix, and he kept like, okay, so like I'm in mixed position, my speaker's over here, so he would keep listening like this, and I'd be like, and I was like, you know, like, what are you doing, man? And he's like, oh, I can't hear over here really at all, or whatever ear it was. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, when I was in a band like similar to you, he's like, I always stood right next to the drum for like a couple decades. He's like, so I don't really hear any. He's like, I can hear it, but he can hear like conversation, but when it comes to mixing, he's like, so I basically hear everything in mono, and I'm like, great, so you're giving me mixed notes in mono, but you know, he also knows it, and he has to like turn his head, and I'm just like, ooh, that's, you know, he's seasoned, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
You know, it's a thing. I mean, as it is, like it's like the coolest conversation. But I think there's also always like some younger cats that are like on here asking for advice. And as we're doing more and more and more and more stuff like mixing in headphones because people don't have like the perfect treated room, you got to take headphone breaks. Even if you think you're not mixing that loud, I'm sure tons of people are probably mixing too loud in headphones. I mean, not too loud to do a good job, but probably too loud to go damage free over a period of time. And it's thing like, you know, somebody had posted, Toby talking about using a DB reader. Yeah, and you might say, oh, cool, it's only 80 to 83 full spectrum C weighted. But if you start chopping that and you start looking, it's like, well, that's part of the average. But let's just say that it's the really low stuff that can be damaging, and also that like 2 to 6K range when you start getting a lot of energy there. If you start saying, well, it's 83 overall, but it's 86, 87 on all that high end shrill stuff. You know, so they say like after you get the 40-year-old 4K dip, where it's just like the average audiologist will say people over, 40 years old start to have a little bit of reduction in that,
Yep. That's the
two,
human
two to
voice.
five range,
Yeah.
and then you keep, dude, that's like something I very rarely even EQ, just sort of knowing that. I'm like, I don't even touch it,
Yeah,
until
yeah.
somebody says, yeah, could you brighten this up? But knowing if it feels like it's slightly under, then it's probably right. Just for, I've seen my audiology reports, and I'm pretty good. I've got some tinnitus like in my left ear, but
Yeah.
the actual like response when you're in that silly box, that like your heartbeat is louder than what's on the phones, and you're like, I think I heard something, and you're clicking the beeper, and you're like, sir, the
I hate
test has
that.
not
Oh, it gives me
started
so much
yet.
anxiety, that stupid test.
Yeah,
It gives me
yeah,
so
yeah.
much anxiety. And my
And
tinnitus always gets worse because it's completely silent.
then I'm like, is that the ringing in my ear, or is that like 4K test tone? Like, yeah,
Yeah,
it's madness in those things, but
it's
you got to
I
do
did,
it.
I take the test every year. I took it last summer. And it's like I get like the worst anxiety to the point where like it's the only thing with my health that I like really like lose sleep over, like the thought of what if, And I take those tests, and I remember like going to the audiologist. I was like, "How'd I do? How'd I do? How'd I do?" And she's like, she's laughing because I told her I'm like I'm an engineer, whatever. She's like, "You're fine." She's like, "Everybody in your position is always freaking out over it."
Right.
She's like, little dips, but nothing. She's like, for what for the length of your career and your age, she's like, you're right about where anybody in your position would be. I'm like, okay.
And then she still said your snare sucked.
Yeah, she basically like, we should redo
It's like, hey, how did I do in the test? Oh, your ears are fine, but that snare,
the last mix was horrible, but your ears, I guess, are fine.
yeah,
You just suck.
yeah. I guess it's your sensibility, not your ears. So,
Yeah, I think what happened to me yesterday is because I was mixing in headphones. And typically this doesn't happen, but I must have been listening to them too loud. And I felt it like, when you come out of them and you've been in them
Yeah.
too long, and it's like, it feels like you got out of an airplane or something.
Yeah.
Like it's like boom in my brain. And it was doing that to me. And I told myself right away, I was like, oh, I was in them too long, and probably listening too loud as well.
I've learned over the last probably maybe like 8 years, give or take, obviously, like for that reason alone, but like really for that reason, like to really enjoy mixing low. Like I know they say to do it because it translates better, and that's true. But like I've really grown just to naturally enjoy it. Like I feel like, yeah, for all the technical reasons, that's fine. But I've done enough. Like that's why like I'm on my Oratones so much. It's it's not just for ear fatigue, obviously, but like listening at that really low perspective, like almost as like a normal consumer or listener, it's like kind of the best of both worlds because you can make good decisions, but you're also really like saving your ears. So like I'll only really turn up loud on my ATCs. Like I just did it before we got on this call because I started a new mix today and I cranked it up. Again, crank it up is like 90 in here. And I was on it like that for maybe like 10 minutes. And now I'm probably not going to get back up there the rest of the day. I try to do it early on, which I don't know if that's better or worse, but
That makes sense to me.
I try to ruin my ears first thing in the morning, so I'm ruined the rest of the day, I guess.
So that's the secret. It's like, Bane or something, you just stay in the dark all the time, it's like
Bane.
or no, I was like, so I was thinking Bruce Banner, the Hulk, it's like I just stay angry all the time,
Yeah, right.
My ears are always trashed, so it's at least a constant.
Whatever works for us.
I'm kind of one of them, Tango.
I started out as a producer.
Yeah, I think we all are, if you ask me, right? Like I know Brian.
I really loved engineering though. I think
Me
some
too.
people have to do it. I actually wanted I wanted to be a mixer. I mean, I wanted to produce, but when I really understood what mixing was, I'm like, I really want to do that.
Yep. Me too. Me too. I'm a gadget guy. I think it comes from that. Like I just love gadgets. I love building things. Like I have like
Knobs.
yeah, exactly. Knobs, all that stuff. Like this is what I'm most intrigued about engineers is like you look at us four, right? None of us have the same setup. Like we all route things differently. We all do things differently. And like that's to me is like, you know, what engineering is. It's just you got all this equipment, figure out how to do it. You know, and there's something about that that like gets me going in the morning. Like I don't want to have a blueprint. I want to just kind of like mess around in my brain and figure out how to decode things.
No, and that's like the whole template culture.
Ugh.
Yeah,
You
I'm over.
know,
Yeah.
Ugh.
I mean, do what you're gonna do. If anybody was ever asking me personally for advice, templates are usually a bad idea. Like you can have your own personal template that's, I would say, as far as IO and things like that are concerned,
Right.
where your place is particularly patched, yeah, it makes it a lot faster when I'm not looking at like, okay, what is input one on my yeah, have that stuff labeled and general purpose things, but like this is my go-to drum bus. What like is it like? It's not going to work for everything, And I guess if you've had good success, then fine, but you know, not like as some kind of a dogma thing like this is what I use every time, therefore, it is written and it shall be forever. Like I don't know. Seems kind of dangerous, and then somebody copying somebody else's settings. Uh, it's
It's
everything you have is different. Your gear's different. The gain structure is different. Like,
yeah, I think it's a disservice to the understanding of things as well. That like, you know, if you just walk in with it already kind of done for you, you're gonna avoid actually understanding what's happening. You know what I mean? And like that's like the one thing I just don't understand about people using templates and then there's no possible way it's going to work across the board. Even if like, you know, like I could, like you said, if you're setting preamps and things like that's a little different. And if you're just doing the same vocalist and same thing over and over, maybe. But
right.
as the energy changes, the emotion changes, the keys change, you know, it requires different settings. You know,
I mean,
these are
honestly, like, when I did this master class with Manny, that was something that I don't want to I mean, on here at least, I don't want to like expose everything he does, but it none of it was like okay. You guys read the the thread on your flood space, whatever, from the Serbian thread, right, with John Haynes. Have you guys gone through that?
No,
Oh my God,
I should probably.
Oh God, go through it. So it's a long thread, like hundreds of pages about how John Haynes, who was Serbian's like right hand man, basically assistant, but for his entire career, and now he's doing all the Atmos stuff. But he basically came on Gearspace in this thread. There's this long thread started years ago where people were like trying to like figure out what Serbian does, right? Because Serbian's in a bubble in Virginia doing everything and whatever. And John Haynes came on basically and was like shut everything down and was like, he's the most simple mixer. Everything goes out of 1 and 2 on Pro Tools. He doesn't have any drum bus. He doesn't use really any parallel. All his drums go out of 1 and 2. He's got like a mix bus that he uses that they kind of keep secret, but it's pretty basic stuff, right? And that's it. He's the most basic mixer, and everyone was like Serbian. We thought he was doing all this crazy stuff because it's Serbian, right? And it turns out he's like the most basic out of 1, 2, get it right, EQ, compression, move on.
Right.
And that's basically how Manny works. I did this masterclass with him in Dubai a couple weeks ago. He's still in the console, but in terms of templates, right? Like it was basically nothing. Even Mixbus, it was like basically nothing. It was like get it right, balance EQ, compressive needed, move on. And like, that's kind of what I've been doing for a while too, for the last maybe like 2 years. Like, cause I experimented before with like, this is my mix bus and this is gonna work every time, and this is my template and this is gonna work every time. And there are some big mixers that do that, but for me, like I work in a lot of genres, which I love, and it just never works ever. So like these guys like Manny and Serbian who are mixing like 99% of the radio, whatever,
Right.
it's like the most basic workflow ever, right? And like that's always what it comes down to. And templates, I think, get people, like you said, get people in so much trouble. They really do. Like, you really got to cater the song, even if it's on the same album. Like, mixing multiple songs on an album, like keeping it simple.
Yeah, man. You could speak for days on like the dangers of that. I think if for all the cool cats and chicks out there listening, is like you can't replace, and it's very, very hard to teach sensibility and taste and what is, I use wide limits, but like what's acceptable for a particular genre, what's expected from particular artists or listeners of a genre. And it's like, yeah, if it's basic EQ, a little comp here and there, everything going out left, right, that means that they're mixing and they're making good musical choices and they're balancing stuff. There's no secret sauce. There's no Goldfoss, Soothe, God Particle. That shit is not going to ever make your mix go from like trash to treasure.
Ever. So, and I think everybody's overdoing, like, this is like common knowledge. I feel like everybody, this has been talked about so much recently, and like it's like everybody's overdoing stuff. Like, I got a session in the mix the other day. It was a Pro Tools session, and it sounded good. And obviously, I'm like, keep everything on, like, send me everything as you get it. And then it was like there was like 10 plugins on the mix bus, and there was all this stuff. And I go through them one by one. I end up using the whole mix bus, and like it sounded so much better without it. And it's like, I think we've all been through that. Where at some point where like you start with make EQ a vocal, you start with an EQ and you put a compressor on, and you put another compressor on, and you put another EQ on, and you de-es it, and then you put a multi-bed on, and then you're like, let me tweak that now, and then you put the EQ on, and you're like, let me compress it again. You put that on, and you're like, I'll put Soothe on. And you de-es it again, like, and before you know it, like throughout the whole mix, you're like 10 things going on your vocal. Like, I mean, I've done that. We've all done it. And then it's like, I learned now, like, as soon as I get to that point where I'm like, there's so much going on, I'll just like get rid of everything and then like re-EQ it. And it's suddenly, it's like, oh, all I needed was the right EQ from the get-go as the whole mix came together. So like, people just overdo it a lot. And I think there's a time and a place to like do an EQ into the compressor, but like most of the time you don't have to do any of that. If it's recorded properly, if it's arranged properly, if it's the right, the right sounds by the producer, like, I think if everybody kept it simple, we as mixers would have a much easier process, but that's not always the case, obviously.
I mean, that happened to me yesterday with my mix. I bypassed like 4 of the plugins I put on and it sounded better. It's just 4 moves that I made that I spent a half an hour on. I'm like, I just literally like walk backwards. And I mean, it happens all the time, but like, I don't know how many times you guys do it or any other engineers out there, but I do this often. I'll listen to my mix and I'll start to bypass just to make sure that the moves I made are right. I do it often, and sometimes I don't need to, but like a lot of times I'll just do it just to make sure I'm making the right moves, and the basics, it should just never go away. It's so true when it comes down to like what Tango is saying, sound selection, how you record yourself, like all of this is like, that's where most of the work is done. The mix should be easy after those points if you get it correct.
Like, another Manny thing that he said, like, the whole thing was very philosophical, but like one of the things he said, and I've lived by this for years, and it's so true. He's like, there's 3 ways to mix. He's like, the first thing is level, get your volumes right. He goes, if your levels aren't where you have to make the level work, then you EQ, and then if you need to compress, you compress. It's like, that's it though. Like and yes, there are times you gotta do a little more, but that's the order. Like, it's funny. So I have an assistant. He was over yesterday, and I was kind of like, he was over, and I was starting to mix. And I described it to him. I'm like, there's a reason why on consoles, right? I was like, if you're familiar with like an actual console, like, SSL, whatever, I'm like, there's a reason why the fader is closest to you. And in terms of a channel strip, it takes up the most real estate, right? Like the fader is this big, right? The whole, or whatever, this big. And then the filters are actually this big. And then the everything, the EQ is that big. And like, but the fader, for the entire thing, in terms of each individual element on there, the faders take up the most real estate, and they're the closest to you, so you don't have to move, because really that's all you need to do and everything else that you do is to kind of, make that balance work, and it's really a simple process. I think it can get difficult when things don't work like that, but that's the name of the game in mixing. It's people think it's like black magic, and like, not really. It's not voodoo. It's like, a lot of small little balance things.
Yeah, I think a lot of, at least how the internet speaks about it, things get conflated and we lose sight of what the basics really are and how important they are. And somehow it's transitioned into, what this plugin is going to do it for you. And that automatically gets you to take your sights off of, okay, are my levels correct? Is it recorded correctly? Did I EQ properly or whatever it is? And you're taking your sights off of that and then thinking a plugin is going to do it for you. And yeah, it's unfortunate, but for whatever reason, at least this plugin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what do you dudes think of sort of like this notion? And Rob, you just maybe think about something. There's this plug-in culture, the preset culture, the whatever culture. And I kind of was thinking like, these are all like methods of doing X. I think largely where the end state isn't known for a lot of people that are in the space, and even people that are probably, that are working professionally. It's like you just keep strapping stuff on to a channel in the hopes of finding something that you like without knowing what you're going for. I just think about some of the, we touch on all these things all the time, but it's like, yeah, it's basics. And I look at these old school guys. I remember when there was a big thing going on Reverb, and then one of those auction sites, and it had like a ton of like Al Schmidt's old mic collection that was being sold off, and Bruce Swedeen's mic collection was being sold off, and different pieces of gear. And those guys would own 100 microphones, and they knew which one to use on a particular thing to get it into the, into the console, to the tape machine, to catch 90% of what you're going for anyway. But I mean, have you guys run across that where you see people just like putting a plug-in on it and you ask yourself like, why are you even doing that? Do you know why you're doing it?
I feel like you said something really important. It's like you're doing something with that. Fuck, how do you word it? It was like they're doing something without realizing why they're doing it. And I feel like every single thing you do has to be for a reason. And it's like if you're just EQing the EQ because you think you should, then like that's when you end up running into the 10 plugins because you're just doing stuff and then reacting to that. It's like if you don't need to do something, you shouldn't do it. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's I had to learn that the hard way over many years. Like I'm getting paid to mix. I need to EQ.
Think about it like this. Think about it like this, right? If you have a nail and you need to put it in a board, what are you going to grab? We all know what we're going to grab, right? We got a nail. Exactly. There's a board. We're going to grab it. And like, that's the whole point of mixing. It's like, here's what I got. What do I need to correct? Is it the levels? Is there, an EQ, that I need, is it harsh over here, right? Is it too dynamic? Maybe I need to squash it. Automatically, we already know what tools we're going to grab if we need to do that. And that's the whole goal. And someone asked me yesterday in my live, they said, you have a process. And that's what Brian's like referring to is develop a process. Understand that like when you start to walk down the line of your mix, I have a process that when I run into this snag, I already know what tool I'm going to grab to get me out of it, and like that's the whole goal, to like being very methodical. And if you're doing presets and you're using templates, you're going to completely skip this. You won't develop a process. There needs to be some form of, okay, if I'm dealing with this, I already know what I'm going to do how to fix it. And you already know what the attack is going to do on the compressor. I know how, if I want to smooth out the vocal, I'm going to do a slower release, those type of things where you already understand in your brain, this is how to fix the issue I'm hearing, and that's the goal of an engineer. And I think that process alone takes the longest to develop, and you got to spend a lot of time in the basics. That's where most of it comes from.
You know, I thinking about this as well as like, and why is it this way today? I mean, I'll toss this out there again as like the resident geezer here. Like I started on an analog console, and there weren't that many choices. There wasn't like, you know, early digital. There wasn't a lot of plugins that they ate up a ton of horsepower. So you just like, yeah, I'm mixing on the desk. There's an EQ on the console. You maybe had a rack, you know, of a couple cool comps. And then if you were like, you know, trying to scrape the bottom, you'd get one of those old like 8-channel APC 88 Presonus like inline compressors that was like nothing smash. You know, you're like, oh, cool, I got 8 channels of comp on here, and you'd insert it on the most important things, or maybe on a bus, and there wasn't even the option of throwing a plug in now. And I think in today's age, where younger engineers coming up, all you have is a virtual interface that, in order for the DAWs to be competitive, they've got to come with a bundle of plugins, and you know, maybe if they'd have give you like, you know, you play a video game and you get to pick the level that you want to play on. Maybe they have that kind of a setting where it's like, okay, you can start off with everything unlocked, you know, if you want to just like take the easy route. But we'll put you at pro level right away, and you'll have 2 comps and 2 EQs, 1 verb, and 1 delay. You know, and then like you have to get your, you know, your gaming achievements up there to unlock like, you know, a multi-band. It's like you don't get to touch a multi-band until you've shown us like you can do basic, you know, mastery of a simple comp and a simple EQ, something like that. But yeah, you know, it's I would love it that, and I realize like in modern talk of privileges and stuff, like I'm really lucky to have had that kind of way of a simple upbringing, that the only thing was to learn the audio engineering side of it and learn gain structure, because you're going to distort stuff. You're going to, you know, it'll be trash like through analog circuits. You can't push everything so hard and then trim it back and then, you know, clip gain it and any of that stuff. You had to like use those tools that were delicate, you know, and you had to be careful with it.
Yeah, that's like, I get asked the question a lot, but people are always like, what, you know, where are you cutting your EQ? Like, I don't know, the mids, because right. I got 3 bands. It's all I got. Like I got high, mids, lows, and
yeah,
it's what I love about analog. You know, like there's no, it doesn't get like super targeted and fine tooth comb, you know, details that like, yeah, I got high, mid, lows. That's all I got is 1 knob for my compression. I have a G bus that I could put in parallel or just use it across the board, you know, and like that's all I got. Get the mix right.
Fisher asked, you know, like how do you, for a newcomer, learn how to EQ to use sweeps? My thing is like the easy. I think it, like I guess for me, like after all these years, my way of EQing is like the most simple thing. It's like I'll do sweeps but really wide, and I'll find where things are conflicting, and like. You know, don't EQ just to EQ. Like I was talking to my assistant yesterday, and I was kind of like teaching him to listen how I am. It's like I'm EQing a vocal and like trying to find the mud. You know, I'm not just cutting out 250 of every vocal because that's what everybody does. Oh, cut 250 and then boost top end. It's like the reason why I'm EQing. You have to find a reason why. It's like if I'm gonna cut low mids out of a vocal because it's muddy, I'm gonna go really wide on SSL. I use my controller, I sweep, and then I'm like, okay. Where in the lower mids is it clashing? Right? There's a frequency range where the low mids of a vocal conflict with the guitars and the bass. That's where you want to cut. But if 250, there's nothing down there in the rest of the track, why are you cutting that out of the vocal? There will be so like learning how to EQ is I would sweep and boost and listen to how everything is reacting to that. Like if you're boosting an EQ on a vocal, you're sweeping, don't listen to the vocal, listen to everything around it. Listen to how it affects everything else. And when you listen from that perspective, EQing becomes easier because you're not just, oh, the vocal's really muddy. Let me just cut out 250 and just listen to the vocal because everything's always in context. So like that's for a newcomer, it might be hard. You have to train your ears to listen to other things.
Yeah.
But when you start EQing that way, and if you start that early on, you'll be much, much, much better early on because, again, you're EQing to make everything work. You're not EQing to make something like a sound better, like you're not EQing. Vocals obviously their loudest thing, but I think maybe that's an advanced way of thinking. But the earlier you can start thinking that way, the better you'll be, in the short term, really.
I think you're exactly right, Mike. And I actually just did a post about this, but EQing comes from the relationship of everything. It's not one individual sound. It's like, how is the highs reacting to the highs in the hi-hats and the vocals? How are they in relationship to each other? And then you could get those to kind of sit where they're like holding hands, right? And that's how I kind of think of EQing, is like I try to break it down in the frequency spectrum. And so when I'm listening to the highs of the vocals, like how is the rest of the highs in the track,
Right.
in relationship to the vocals? And that's like, to me, like that's the key to getting good at EQ, is that you're thinking of the whole track in a relationship rather than, just trying to pinpoint one thing and, fix one thing out of the track.
That's like harsh vocals. Like that's always been a question for a million people. Like, how do you deal with harsh vocals? And there's tutorials, I'm sure, like put soothe on or multi-band this, and it's like that doesn't work though. Like you have harsh vocals, like a harsh lead vocal, and it's like, let's just say 3K, right? It's like recorded terribly. It's like you really can't EQ that. You really can't let's be honest. You really can't multi-band it. You can't really EQ it, because once you do that, then you have a whole other set of problems, right? So instead of EQing the vocal, think of the whole spectrum, right? You have your low end and your top end, and then everything in between. If your vocal is really harsh right here, you have to have a certain amount of 3K in your mix. So leave the vocal alone and then EQ around that, and leave your vocal where it is. Like EQing is all about perspective. It's listening to individual things, listening to how everything's reacting around it. It's listening to the spectrum. Sometimes EQing is about like feeling, like, does it just make this feel better? Like, there's so many different perspectives that like I go in and out of in a mix, like automatically. But I think for me, like I said, like the biggest thing that I had to learn early on was like, don't listen to the sound you're EQing for the most part. Listen to, like you're saying, like the whole thing, everything, because that's why, like, if I make stems, like when I'm making stems, or sometimes like I'll listen to something I EQ. Like the other day, I mixed a record, like a folky record, and there was like acoustic guitars. And the mix was great. I really liked it. Everyone was happy. And then when I was going to make stems, I was listening to the acoustics, and I was like, oh, those sound a little interesting. And they were like really over compressed because the producer said something like that. And like when I was doing the stems, I was like, oh man, this guitar sounds terrible. But then when you listen in context, it added all the energy of the mix. Like it was amazing in context. So like, shifting perspective when you're mixing to, like, you have to constantly think of the whole record. Constantly, like, I used to make notes. Like, I did a like webinar thing like last year, and something that I kept saying was like zooming in, zooming out. I think I made a video like a year or two ago on this. Like every time you zoom in, like on a waveform, you're also zooming in with your ears. So like anytime you're like trying to find like all that technical crap that I hate, like you have to remember to zoom out. Otherwise, you're mixing a sound and not a song. And like, and that goes to like, I'll be honest, I only try to find resonances only if they bother me. I don't search for resonances in every mix. I don't care. I don't care about that. I'm at the point where, like, when it comes to really technical stuff, I do so little of it. I can do it all day if I had to, but I try to do as little technical work as possible. All my EQing is like wide bands and just making things feel right. But like, yeah, you got to zoom out. I say that all the time.
I'll give you like two things. Make sure you cut that bit. That's a great little chunk right there.
Oh, I even said I was
you're mixing the song, not the sound.
Yeah.
So for anybody out there, like, it's kind of curious about this. This is like, it's not the sauce. This is just a teaching tool that I could give you in these issues of EQing, using like a vocal as an example when you're deciding to EQ it because you're hearing something that's off. I would be, and you sort of touched on it about like frequency clashing and that. Go ahead and solo your vocal, and then one by one on every track that you have, solo each track and just listen to the comparison. And this is, as you get better at it, you'll probably be like, yeah, it's their guitar and the vocal. There's something weird there. Yep. But as you're training your ears, go to the kick, go to the hat, go to the snare, whatever, go through all your samples and then compare it with each. And then you'll hear as you get more isolated, okay, yeah, it's synth pad number 2 has this funky thing that's stepping on the vocal, causing you to think, oh, I might need to EQ that additively or subtractively, and then turn one of them down and then disengage the solos. Did that help clear up the problem? You know,
like that.
Yeah, and that's just an easy way of training your ear how to hear it. And then if it's like, well, no, there's no real weird clash. Maybe it is a super harsh vocal. And in those kind of cases, I'd go back and I do the same thing and say, okay, not what is clashing when you're doing a source and then a comparison that's moving as far as like what you're soloing against. Like, is there maybe something that's warmer that I can boost that offsets a little bit of that edginess on a vocal? You know, sometimes like you get the sort of, you know, YouTube culture that you got to fix the harsh vocals.
Yeah.
Man,
yeah.
if you get a harsh vocal, you don't have to fix it. You have to mix it. And that's the job. Sometimes it's just harsh. And you try your best to like tame stuff, but if it's harsh, man, it's harsh. And
I always say embrace the harsh.
Yeah,
like,
there's no fixing that. You have to mitigate the extreme damage that it can do on the overall product. But then sometimes, man, like, who cares? Let's make the harsh the focus. That's the thing. Everything else is nice and smooth around that. And it gives it a supporting body. Maybe take the harsh out of everything else.
That's
whatever the feature is. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I just said like, but using that tool of the, you know, solo comparisons for younger ears, I think before you're deciding about compressing or EQing or any of that stuff, just listen one by one and see if anything is stepping on each other or something else could be there to be more supportive. Or, you know what, sometimes your vocal is probably 9 times out of 10, your vocal is just too darn loud, you know. Turn it down.
So like this is. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Brandon.
No, I mean, I Disha had a good question. I think we should answer is like how do each of us approach our mixing process? Like how do we each like start a mix, and you know that kind of goes to like compressing before you EQ or EQing before you compress. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you finished what you were saying, I just wanted to make sure we like visited that question at some point because I feel like it's a good one to talk about.
Oh, I'm done. Yeah, just compare tracks.
I was gonna just quickly just say like the spectrum thing, like with tonal balance. Like this is my spectrum. I'll say quick. This is like combination of like a couple hundred of my mixes, right? So this is like kind of my spectrum, right? So like this is like all the frequencies, your low end, your mid range. Like let's just say for example, like this is 3K. Like there has to be this much information in a mix, right? It has to be that much. If your vocal is up to here in 3K and there's other sounds that's making it go up there, well, you cut the sounds around it so that your vocal is now the loudest part in the range. So like this is a very general thing, but it's easy to visually see it. So like, you know, 2 + 2 = 4, and this is 4 over here, you know. Actually, no, I don't know how to use that as an example. He's
like, yeah, I forget everything I just said. You know?
Sometimes 1 + 3 has to equal 4, sometimes whatever. But like the point is like that spectrum with harsh vocals especially, or low end, like it's as basic as like, you know, you want your 808s to sit in a nice place, so you cut low end out of everything else. It's the same exact thing, but for the entire spectrum.
Yep.
Anyway, that's all. That was all I was gonna say. So that was a good question though that you brought up, Brandon, about that Disher said about starting mixes.
Yeah, I mean, like for me, and it's kind of like also goes off of what we're all talking about like making decisions about things and EQing and all this stuff. It's like for me, I just kind of listen to what I'm sent and kind of gauge what the essence of the record is and then just react. Like I don't think about doing stuff, I think about like reacting to stuff. And like maintaining the essence of the record and or like enhancing the essence of the record. So like I'll just get the balance that I'm like more or less of what like the rough mix is, and like to maintain that kind of vibe, like the vision that I was given, and then just like work from there and ask myself like, what is this asking me to do? Like, is this, you know what I mean? Like at a very like broad strokes sense of the thing, like not even like thinking about EQ or compression at all. It's like, does this feel like does this vocal feel like it needs to like vibe a little bit more? Like, how do I do that? You know what I mean? Like, is it, you know what I mean? Like it is, is the vocal asking to be brighter? If it's not, then like I won't touch them, you know? Um,
You know,
that's,
like
that's
that was like a great question, and Dish actually asked about like templates and things like that. And for me, like personally, if I were to be, training an engineer, come in and like, how are we going to start? I would have them build the sessions out, and I wouldn't have them walk in with templates. I would, let's make the decisions one by one so we could understand the process, and let's develop a process for you that will work for you that you can recreate over and over and be consistent with. That would be a big, big one for me. And so inside that process would be what Brandon was just saying is like, now we're going to address what do we have here, and then what tools would you grab to start, to get the mix, to just get it to a good starting basis, and sometimes that's EQ first, sometimes it's compression first, but letting that engineer like that is starting out make those decisions. And then after they make the decisions, explain to me why you made it. Let's break it down. Let's understand this process from A to Z. And so the more we explain what we're doing, the better we'll understand what we're doing. And so that's kind of something I do for myself a lot. And which, by the way, going live on TikTok has helped me a lot because I'll go live on TikTok. I do something and someone's like, hey, what are you doing there? Now I got to stop and explain it to you.
Right.
I got I got
Like, I don't know what I'm doing.
yeah, dude, I was just like trying something, right? I just closed my eyes and but anyways, like it's really, really important to be able to explain what you're about to do before you're going to do it. And that's something I would try to gift every, aspiring engineer with is be able to explain your process to me every time. Why are we doing this? Before you even grab it, give me your idea. What are you trying to do here? And let's explain it to me. Okay, that makes sense. Let's get an EQ. Let's do that. Maybe EQ isn't the best pick for that idea, and get them to really think about it.
Yeah, I would to answer his question. At first, like Brandon, that's for my money. That is the only way to approach it. I do the exact same thing. Like I'm not, even sometimes. I mean, I'll listen to a reference if they send it. Sometimes, somebody sends something over and it's just like, I don't know. I should say a reference. I try to like that's the whole reference mix thing is like, I want to have mixes for other clients that then people will use as the reference mix, right? Rather than somebody's rough that comes through. I'm surprised nobody ever stole that name years ago. Anyway, it's like, sometimes I don't listen to the roughs that come through just to see what I can do with it. But yeah, then the rest of it is like, listen to the song. It'll tell you what it needs to, needs to be done. And that can be like, some people might think that's a little bit of woo-woo magic. But I think it's just trying to have the best, using your sensibilities and how it's a conversation with you and the music that's coming to you, and then hopefully you also get some insight from the artist. I always try to get lyrics as well. And I want to read down the lyrics and try to like, what's the point of this song? Am I missing anything as far as like the emotional or intellectual content of it before I'm thinking about compressed before EQ or not? I will say though that every time I get tracks, because I've been burned so many times in the past, there is a good workflow template though. I get everything in, I import it into a session, and then I'm starting, naming conventions. Like, we battle that all the time, and it's a losing battle. So just know that it might not be named correctly, or it'll say guitar, but really it's a guitar synth patch. Or what kind of a guitar is it? A 12-string versus, well, it's a quattro. Like, okay, they're totally different than like a Strat through a twin. Going through making sure everything is labeled appropriately so you can manage the session so you can easily navigate and you're not guessing. And I'll go through and I factor it into the time on a session. Is like, I'm gonna go through, and I'm a nerd, and I listen to every single track by itself, not to start making artistic choices. I'm just listening for clicks, pops. I mean, a lot of times, your eyes get more attuned to like, oh yeah, that doesn't look right on the waveform, but I'll still go through and I'm listening to it and like, oh yeah, that's weird. There's some kind of distortion, or, doing a classical thing and you can hear like somebody sniff, or a squeaky music stand or something like that, just so I can identify those spots on the tracks, just to ensure that where I'm starting from, I'm not mixing around something, then later I'm in a dense mix and I've already EQ'd and compressed and I wonder what this sound is and I've got to go find it, and you're like, oh yeah, it's a key click on a trumpet with didn't have the right pad on there or something like that, But yeah, other than those administrative things and making sure it's clean, then it's just listen to the song and let it take you where it wants to take you.
Yeah, and I like another thing to ask is like, are you enhancing the sound? Is like the goal, are you enhancing the sound, or are you like creating the sound? Like,
Right.
are you getting a production that already sounds like a record, or are you getting just recordings that are raw and don't sound like anything yet? You know what I mean?
Right.
Just like, and they're like, then the lines between like production and mixing kind of get blurred. But like, if you're a new mixer and you're getting productions from other people, more of the job is going to be probably like enhancing the sounds that you get. Whereas like, I've gotten stuff from people where it's just like everything's raw and uncompressed and like, which is fine, but it also comes to me like not really sounding like anything. It's just these recordings that are thrown together that not only do I have to mix it, but like first have to like make it sound like something. You know what I mean? Like kind of like tonal choices.
Sure.
Like almost like completing the recording process before mixing it.
Yeah.
So like those are two different like places to start something from, I think. Like, and if you identify which one, where you're at, like what you're getting, or like if it's your own stuff, you know what I mean? Like the moves you make like in your DAW like could be production decisions, and like then you realize, okay, my production's done. Like, what do I need to do to like enhance this as far as like a mix goes? You know what I mean? So there's different, I think, scenarios you have to look at to like decide like what are you receiving and where in the process of like the creation of the record is it, I think. You know what I mean?
I think like, yeah, I feel like that's a good point. I feel like for me, like most of the stuff I'm getting is like at a point where like I don't get completely raw files ever. I never do. Like I mean I can't maybe vocals sometimes, but I think again, this is just me. Like everything I get is pretty much like approved by people, and it's like several people, and it's like ready to mix. So like, because I don't like getting completely raw files, because I feel like it's just all subjective, and that's when you send something and it can go in a million directions, and I might love it and they might hate it. It is what it is. But like, but that's a great point though, because I mean, you really have to determine like, what is this job that I'm doing this today? What does this job entail? But like, in terms of like starting a mix, I'll just quickly say like, I actually start mixes different than most people. Like my assistant preps everything, and then I pull it up in the day. I start on overtones, and I literally just listen to the balances. And like opposite to like you guys, like, or some of you guys, like I actually spend a lot of time in the beginning listening to rough mix and balancing, and I just balance. And like I get a lot of stems these days. I get some Pro Tools sessions, but I get a lot of stems. So my assistant will like create a Pro Tools session with my template, which is just routing. And then I clip gain. Like I keep all my faders at 0 in the beginning, and I listen on my overtones at like a conversation level, and I just balance it, and I AV with the rough. My assistant's kind of learning that, because I always want to start exactly from the rough mix. Like I want to start there because it is what it is these days. Like that's what people, at least that in the stuff I work on, that's what people want. They want to improve rough mixes because they've already listened to those rough mixes like 7,000 times. So that's the record. So like I start on overtones, and I really I get rid of the low end, I get rid of the top end, and I just keep what translates, which is the mid range, and I just balance, and that's all I do is balance. And I don't use any EQ, I don't use any compression, I don't do nothing. I turn the rough down, I balance. Then I take a break, come back, go to my ATCs with subs. So now I have everything, but the record's balanced. And what happens is sometimes the stems are balanced once in a while with the rough mix. Sometimes I have to recreate that on overtones. But as long as I'm starting from that balance, then it's like, okay, the balance is there. What needs to be done? And then that's when it's really like I bought this controller a while ago. I don't know if you can see it. The UC1, you see it? And I literally go through and and like as I EQ, I'll throw a compressor or a channel strip on, and I just kind of sweep like I was explaining earlier for certain sounds. And I'm just trying to find what do I like about the sound, what don't I like, and I'm listening to everything in context. And I try to get everything in like as early as possible. Like I might, when I go to my ATCs, I might solo the drums and the bass and get the low end right, but I try not to spend more than like 10 minutes max on something. So like it's real quick, the low end, get it right, and get everything in as quickly as possible, and then mix the record. Like some guys would like start with drums like one by one in EQ and then bring the bass in EQ and go down the console. I suck at that because every time I get to the end, I'm like, crap, my drums suck now. Let me go back. So I need everything in as quickly as possible. And so at that point, it's just I do a lot of EQing, but not drastic. It's more about feeling. It's more about making that initial overtone balance work than anything else. So that's kind of my process. But in terms of like the dry versus wet stems or, completely raw stems, I prefer not to get completely raw stems these days because producers are doing rough mixes and artists are doing rough mixes, and that's the record. So like I have to, on my PDF I send out to new clients. It's like if you're gonna send me like a live drum kit, you can send me like completely raw drums. That's cool, but like don't send me raw files across the board because those are production decisions. Those aren't mixing decisions. Those are. I'm not gonna spend an hour and a half trying to recreate a distortion to use on a guitar with a wop. Like I'm not gonna do that because. Just not. That's your production decision. So print it.
That's why I think it's like an important thing to, like, if you are trying to mix and you're new, like understanding like the distinction between like a production decision and a mix decision, like mixing, because you can use plugins to do both. You know what I mean? You can EQ something way more drastically as a production decision for tonal selection or sound design than like if you're mixing. And like for what you do, Mike, and what like most of us do, and like what Serban's doing, for example, like Serban's going to get like a Taylor Swift record, and to most people before he mixes it, it's going to sound like it's mixed.
Pretty much done.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's already going to sound done. So then like, yeah, all he has to do is like the most minimal shit, because like the goal at that point is like, don't ruin it. Don't fuck it up.
Right.
You know what I mean? But then like if you're new and you don't understand that, like getting a production that sounds like it's basically already like it could be released, like if you don't understand like that's where the end point is of production, then like, and you're used to just getting raw files that don't sound like they're produced, then like the mixing part of it becomes a little bit more skewed of like, am I mixing this or am I producing this? And like understanding where that line is drawn, I think is important. And like the philosophy is kind of different for everybody, you know what I mean? But like you've heard it before, is like send a mixer send a producer a recording that sounds mixed or whatever, you know what I mean? Send a mixer a production that sounds mixed, send a mastering engineer a mix that sounds mastered, type of thing. It's like, get it to the point of like as good as you can get it with the job that you're doing before you send it to the next person. And I think if people understand that, like if an artist understands that, like make the sounds sound the way you want them before you send them to somebody to mix, and then let them take it from there. Like Mike, how you're saying, like you get stuff that's processed, you get stuff that sounds like the record, and then you mix it from there. Then you make those minimal decisions where you're just like, all right, I'm just going to balance this, and then like react in like very subtle ways to make it just like enhance it a little bit, versus just like raw sounds. Like, what does this record sound like? I don't know. And if that's fine, like if the artist is giving you the creative freedom to like shape the sound of the record from scratch, then that's what they're doing. And then that's where you really have to use your like discretion of like, okay, what is the drum sound I'm going for on this record, versus like, okay, I've already gotten a drum sound, given to me, and now like how do I make it better? You know what I mean? Like,
It's tough though because that's very subjective and like I think you really and those are fun. It's not like I don't like doing them, but
yeah,
it's one thing if it's like a very punk record, you know exactly what it is. But like I feel like especially in today's day where like there's no such thing as a genre anymore. I think crossing over, it's like it's tough because it's not wrong. If you send something like that to an artist that's complete, you get stems that are dry, raw, and you mix it, and you're like, I love the way they sound. You send it off, and they're like, it's not what I was going for. It's not wrong. It's not a wrong mix. You don't suck. It's just, there's so many ways to do it. So like, I think if you do get sessions in that are completely raw and you're kind of going from scratch, you really have to be on the same page from the beginning. And it's not always the mixer's fault either. Sometimes artists are like, I did want to hear it that way, and you nailed it, but I hate it like that. So let's try. It's like,
Right.
and it's like, all right, or it's something simple like go about the drums however or drums and vocals, do whatever you want, and then you mix the record in there, and it's the same thing, and you're like, all right, let's go to a different sound now, and you're like, can you just kind of redo this part? Well, the whole mix is based around those two things. Everything is based around that. So, that's kind of why I think, and again, this is just for me. Like I always try to like prevent that from happening, but if it is the job and it is the case, it's really good to have like long conversations with artists and producers. And like I always ask new clients, even if like the stems are a pop record in the real process, and I'm having a conversation with them, like actually on the phone, which is rare these days. I'm like, what are you listening to? Like, what do you like to listen to? Like, forget about references. Like, what do you listen to when you drive? Like, because I always say, like, as mixers, like, we have to, like anytime someone tries to give me notes about something and they're like, I'm just rambling on, I have this whole notebook of pages of, like a therapist, of notes to try to extract so much information because we can go in so many different directions with mixes. So, like, that's just my way of trying to, like, prevent that. Oh, I went in the wrong direction, whatever, because, it's tough. It's, we have to be able to, like, read people's minds, and it's not always... damn near impossible most of the time, Yeah. Unless you have a really good relationship with somebody that you've worked with for years.
Yeah, man, I think we've all been in the spots where you've gotten something that's nearly finished and they're just asking you to add that final bit and looking for a lot of times another perspective on what could be a releasable mix. And you might do something, it's like, I think there's a little clash here. We could enhance this just a touch. Like, and it's never recreating the wheel. You're like, I hear exactly what you're going for. You've told me what you're going for. So I'm going to give you my take on how to get you where you stated you want to be. Then on the flip side, you get a lot of, and I would say that what the majority of younger mixers will get are largely unfinished ideas. I laid down 40 tracks of guitar and I don't know which one I want to use. I mean, and then you'll get those big sessions and you're like, do you want all these guitars? And a lot of times they're ideas, and then that is a chance for you to learn how to put on the producer hat as well, helping that client, before you just like dunk on it. All right, man. Like, and if you're new, take it as a prime opportunity to learn, rather than being like, man, I'm only doing this for $20 an hour. I told him I'd mix it for $100 and it's taken me a month because we're going through all these tracks. And it's like, well, this is where you're learning actually what happens. But yeah, then listen through all those and you might find some gems in there and you might be able to make some actually informed decisions on how to take the unfinished idea and using your mixing ability and then your musical sensibility to help produce it and get it to a place that probably, I mean, if someone's giving you those unfinished thoughts, they don't know where it's going to go anyway. So that's a chance of creating something towards the end. You'll get everything in the middle. I like being sort of in the middle. I mean, I don't mind like getting paid to listen to something that sounds great. And I'm like, oh, maybe I'm going to pan the guitar right over there. Perfect. Check, please. Like, no problem with that. But being able to like not have to fix everything and still have, you know, some latitude to make cool decisions. That's the happy spot for me to be in.
Yeah, for sure. I think like I like to do like like I'm on a range of like I get different things, you know what I mean? Like and I enjoy doing all of it. It's just like um but I'm also a producer too. Like you know what I mean? So I understand like in my head, like you said, musical sensibility is like, okay, what would like from a production standpoint, like what does this record need? Because it needs that kind of production decision at this point. Like it needs me to like determine the direction of it. And so like it's the irony of it is like if you're trying to just be a mixer and you're just starting out, you're likely going to have to make more production decisions than mixing decisions at first until you get to a point where you're getting productions that where you're like really just mixing. And like again, the like boundary between production and mixing is like kind of subjective. Everybody's got like a different line of like where that starts and ends. And really it's all production and really it's all mix. It's like kind of all it's all just one. You're just like working on making a record. And like you kind of I think the idea is like taking it from where it's at and bringing it to where it needs to be is like kind of the job at the end of the day.
I
Yeah,
feel
you know,
like
oh, so,
no, I was gonna say quick because I said this last weekend. Like you're spot on, Brandon. And you know, this might not go over well, but like with a lot of younger people, but like I feel like to be a mix, like I remember when I was first coming up, and like I wanted to be like a man, you know, certain whatever. Like I wanted to be these guys, but like I had to spend years recording, right? Like there was no, and this technology too is a big thing. And you know, I don't mean this in a bad way, but I feel like now, like a lot of people call themselves mixers, but they don't really have a lot of experience. And I think there was a point, you know, up until recently where like you really didn't become a mixer until you had more of that production experience. Because I mean, like I know I spent just me personally, I spent years recording with a ton of producers and like being in a room with big producers, understanding how songs get made and why decisions were made and why you use multiple, you know, microphones and a snare. Like, yeah, it's common knowledge, but why are they doing that? What are the tones? Like, why are producers arranging a song a certain way? What are they going for? Like, you really should know how a song is made and what goes into it more than just structure. Like, the, you know, feeding off of people in the room, all that stuff. Those are things that mixer, like, you would need to experience before you became an actual mixer, because for all the reasons you're talking about, Brandon, like, they kind of cross over producers and mixers. And I think now you're seeing, because of technology, and it's cool because you're getting cool sounding stuff, but you know, maybe I sound old and I'm not trying to come off. I think we're in a really good time, but I think for years to become a mixer, you really had to gain experience because, you know, mixing is the final step. And like you're saying, it's very close to producing. It's essentially, it's why mixers can get points, right? It's why recording engineers don't, and it's why mastering engineers don't. No offense to them, but mixing is the closest thing to production you're going to get on a technical side. So it essentially is in a way. So I think that's the difference between nowadays, where a lot of mixers are like, or people that call themselves mixers just don't have the experience yet, and not even technical experience, but the basics. Like, how is a song even made? What are the decisions that go into it? You know?
yeah, I want to throw just this idea out for anybody. And Brandon, you made me really think about it. It's like production is a process, and a producer is a part of the production process, as is the mixer, as is the artist. But sometimes it's like, I think these lines get blurred in there, and remembering like, yeah, you're mixing, and you might have to make some decisions on direction, which is a part of the overall production itself, as an entity that's outside of actual, you know, people with certain responsibilities for it, you know. And ultimately the producer should be, you know, it's like leadership. You're providing the purpose, motivation, and direction for why it is we're doing what we're doing. And Mike, to like you're saying, it's like, yeah, a lot of people are mixing, and that's cool, but not to gatekeep, but a lot of them don't know what the purpose motivation or what the direction is of what they're mixing. And so,
Yeah, it's not picky
I mean,
at
it's like
all.
you're doing it in a way, and if you're getting paid for it, you're in the profession. But
Right. Yeah.
it's like you're still learning at that point in time, and I think that it's as you know, as I get older, it's like I'm finding it easier and easier to be humble and to say, hey, it's totally okay to learn, and it's totally okay to say that you're new at something, and you have a, you still have a value, you still have the, the knowledge and desire, and you're outside of anything technical that we've talked about is like allow yourself as a younger engineer to be open to new ideas, because they probably are all new ideas to you,
That's a good one.
and allow for critique. And if you're older and seasoned and not, some grizzled, back in my day, kid, like, provide good feedback for younger mixers, producers, engineers, whatever role you're in, and, help to elevate them, and then, have something positive and beneficial to say. And then if you're the one being given that information, be open to taking it in, and at least, write it down, file it away. Sometimes, like some of the best lessons you can learn are from people, and they're the things that what not to do. You can hear a lot of bad advice that's out there, and you're like, all right, I'm going to listen to that bad advice, not to take it and apply it, but I'm going to like, that sounds like complete nonsense. I'm never going to do that, and, sort of like to put it in the red flag category,
Yeah.
Very
And
well
your
said.
internal gauge is pretty good at like picking up on that stuff too. Like if it feels wrong, it's probably not right for you. You know what I mean? And like you can kind of gauge that. And like as the other thing too is it's like kind of all semantics at the end of the day. Like who's like mixing, who's producing. It's like you're like everybody's involved in creating a record at the end of the day. And like traditionally it looked like one thing and now it looks like something slightly different. And like I don't think it really matters when we're all just kind of creating art, you know what I mean? And like techniques and processes to do certain things, like like all these things that we're talking about is just like how to get something, like I said, like before, is just like something from where it's at to where it like needs to be.
Right. Totally.
That's all at the end of the day. Yeah.
We did get a good from Austin. So the question was, how do you know what reverbs to use? Is there a general rule? Do you use reverb calculators?
What feels right? Like,
Yeah.
Many times I'm like, oh, plate's gonna be perfect for this record, and I put a plate on, and I was like, that sucks. Like,
Right. It's so sizzly.
yeah, I know we're talking like against templates, but when you're kind of learning, even now, like have a couple of reverbs open and put the sends on, and as you're mixing, just go through and play with them, see what feels good. Some reverbs, like, technically sometimes, like if I have a really bright vocal, a darker reverb works. Yesterday I had a really bright vocal and I used a really short, like ping pong slap that I rolled all the top end off, so it actually like was subtle, but it added body to the vocal, but the vocal was bright. So like there's things like that you can like counter, but I don't know. I'm usually wrong when I think I know what kind of reverb I need to use. So just go with what works in the experiment, see what feels right in when you're working.
It did kind of get a little detailed. Do you have a preference in terms of, or maybe thought process of choosing a plate, hall, church, different styles of reverb?
I do.
Me?
Oh,
I
sorry.
do too. I do too. But go ahead, Mike. Yeah.
No, yeah. Sometimes I think, I kind of know what may work at this point. Like I said, it doesn't always work, but like, it's easier in like like a throwbacky record. Like, yeah, I'm gonna use the BX20, but the spring, and I'm gonna use a older plate, and those are actually, I feel like, easier than modern pop records, because But I have a million save track presets, and I pull them up, and I just kind of wing it, see what feels good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are definitely things that are the genre specific that's just a matter of being an engineer that's done the work of the critical listening and ear training aspect, which I think is one of the overlooked tools when people are talking about plug-in chains and this, that, or the other, and should I parallel this? Like, do you understand what any albums in the past have sounded like and what made them get to the point that where they are? What's up, HB?
What's up, y'all? What's up, guys? What's up, man? What's up, family?
But
How are you, man?
Huh?
How are you?
Hey, I'm great, man. I'm great, man.
We're just getting into the weeds of engineering questions.
Okay.
Dish did ask a question. I don't know if you want to chime in if you have any ideas. But he's basically asking, like, how do you choose your reverbs if you have a process about it?
Oh, good question.
It's like, go with what sounds good.
I was just about to say, go with whatever one you like. That's really it. Determine, because you got different ones, determine, like a longer reverb or a short one, like with a crazy tail or a short tail. So either one, that's what I would say. Whatever works. Hold on, God. Let me turn this down. Yeah, either one. See how it fits in the, I don't know about you guys. Typically, like if I get a vocal, I would just try. You're gonna have your favorite ones, right? And I would say have multiple ones. Just have try to have at least 3 to 4 reverbs that you actually like, and whatever records you're working on, you go through each one of them and see which one fits that record. That's one of the best ways I say to start off.
Yeah, I think you're saying, especially even about times. That's like, if I have a template, which is something we talked about earlier about like kind of avoiding template culture.
Yeah.
I'll have a short, I'll have a long, and that kind of thing is sort of in the early process trying to find something that works and helps an instrument or the overall track sit a little bit better. But yeah, it's like find the one that you kind of like, and if a lot of this is advice for younger people, and like work with that. And like I was lucky. The first studio I was in had a 480L, and that's really that's a great reverb as your first one, and it's a classic. It's been on a bazillion hits. Once you hear it, you're like, oh yeah, I know that exact verb. An SPX 90, you've heard it a ton of times. RMX 16, we've heard that over and over again on so many classics. The H3000, all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, find that one verb that works for you. More than likely, the shorter time is going to be the better one. I think a lot of people will put a verb on and they want to hear this super long tail, and it's cool in isolation, but generally it makes a track feel much more muddy. You'll find like really, really short verbs, ambience verbs, like on guitars and things like that, actually really help them to sit nicely without it being, washed out in a mix and that kind of stuff. But yeah, find one, pick it, and do a long and a short.
I would say if you guys would agree or disagree, but I think a good starting point is leads, anything that's like in front, more of a short reverb. Yeah, stuff that's in the back, which is like highlights, voiceover, ad libs, that could be more of a longer reverb because it's not. I think the reverbs that's longer that has crazy tells. If there's a lot of words coming, it will muddy everything up. So you need that to be very short. Due to like ad libs and voiceovers and stuff like that, because they're not very. It's a lot of words. Those can have the tails on them, and that's pretty much I think that's a good starting point. And then you just pick the ones you guys like, and at least that's what I do.
Yeah, I agree.
I'll add a little bit to this because I do kind of walk in with the philosophy on reverbs, but I try to visualize the setting. Like if I'm going to get like a jazz record in, right? Typically, we're going to hear this in like a cafe, maybe like a smaller set setting. And so choosing reverbs that would cater to that, maybe more of a room style reverb rather than a bigger reverb. If I'm doing like a ballad type record, maybe we're doing big hall reverbs or church reverbs with a longer decay, and so I do try to think in those terms, but most of all, I do exactly what Mike does, what HB does. I have like 8 different reverbs set up, and I'm just swapping out which one's working for the record.
Yeah, and I think another good point, especially for people just trying to figure out the reverbs, because that is something to figure out when you're mixing records, right? Also, I think, and this is what I probably would say with any effect like delays and reverb, you should feel it more so than hear it.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think
Always.
that's the key. So a lot of people try to make it so you can hear it, and you're supposed to actually it's supposed to be a feel, not an actual. If you can really hear it, it's probably too much, most likely, unless that's the actual effect that you're trying to go for.
That's the thing with reverberation, kind of getting into the audio nerd side of stuff. It's like you're trying to replicate the sound of a voice, an instrument, whatever it is, in a particular space as you would naturally, experience it. And a lot of times, like, unless you're just in a giant room, that's like when you're actually hearing verb and maybe even like echoes on it. But the rest of it is just trying to make it sound natural in a space. Like nothing's ever super dry unless you're in some kind of anechoic chamber or something like that. But yeah, I think that's a great thing. It's just like, I don't want to hear it. I want to feel it. And I want to feel the difference when you turn it off.
Yeah.
But I don't want to hear it when you turn it back on. It's just like, oh yeah, that everything feels like it sits a little bit better. And HB, what you're saying about, like, especially backgrounds, like background is a background, unless you're doing like multiple harmony parts where everything is up front. But if it's a background, that verb, and with a little bit of a play and pre-delay, it'll help to push that even further in the back, and it just like creates this lush thing that wraps around the lead vocal rather than competes with it, for sure.
Definitely. I got a question for you guys. Do you guys do this trick? I think I seen Chris Lloyd do this one, where he takes 2 reverbs. So let's say if you got a lead, right? And which I don't actually do this, but I thought it was a genius idea where he would take 2 reverbs and he would have one pan to the left and a different one pan to the right. What do you guys think about that?
I've tried that before.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Eddie Van Halen guitar sound. It was sort of that way, main on one side with a short and then the long verb on the other side, and it kind of wraps around you.
Yeah.
I think if it's stylistically, I mean, that's one way of doing it. And if it works for the track, then I don't know if it would work for every track.
Right.
But if people are hiring him, obviously they're hiring him for his thing.
Right.
So he probably does it on about everything.
Yeah.
And that's part of his sound and sensibility. But I think it's a cool idea for sure.
That's actually interesting. I remember hearing about it, but I just forgot. And I'm gonna just try it to see what sort of results you can achieve.
That's his trick. Because I think I would say this, out of the records I've mixed, I think when it comes to reverb, one of the probably most difficult thing to find is a very good a slap reverb, like the one that's like super quick and it doesn't sound like, it don't give you this kind of like honky sound, you know what I'm saying? And that took me a while to find the one that I really like. So for like engineers or people that's creating music, which one do you guys use? What's like your favorite one?
Man, the old Avid, that Telray delay
Yeah.
that's on there, set like super short. I mean, you could have everything from just like the feeling of a double to total rockabilly, and everything in between. I like that one a lot.
I've been using the Metric Halo Dirty Delay. There's like a slap preset on there that I've been really liking recently. The slap delays are like one of those things that, like, it's been hard for me to find something that I like.
Yeah.
for whatever reason.
Yeah. It took me a while. Rob, what about you? Which one you use?
I use Sound Toys all the time, but actually the Telray, like I find myself using that every now and then. So I do both H delay, so kind of the typical ones. But I'd say 98% of the time I'm using Sound Toys, just because of the versatility.
Mm.
You could actually there's a Telray setting in the Sound Toys.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Mhm.
I use the one of my favorite ones is the Greg Wells. The what's it called? The Greg Wells. It's the voice plugin he got. I think it's voice something. It's like blue or whatever. But his little quick slap is really good. I actually use it on like almost all my records pretty much. It's like my go-to one.
Hmm.
Because it's like a mixture. It's like the way he said it. It's like a it's like a little miniature delay in there, and then he also added like a flanger in there kind of sound. So it's like real dope.
That's what I like about Sound Toys, because like
Yeah, centric. Yeah. There you go, Austin.
Yeah.
centric, yeah.
Yeah.
Sound Toys, it has like all these special like filter features, and then you could saturate it, and then pick based on the filters that you pick. Like it gives like either a dark slapback or a bright slapback, and like you could customize it. So that's like kind of the go-to one that I like.
Yeah, I love like Echo Boy for doing or like for doing like delay sound design within the actual plugin, like finding something cool like that. I love Echo Boy for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Also, like I don't know if you guys do this, but like sometimes I'll just how like Echo Boy defaults to like the lowest feedback and you only get like one delay. Sometimes I'm just like lazy, and if I know I only want one delay, I'll literally put Echo Boy on there just because I know I don't have to touch the feedback knob.
Yeah.
Right, sure.
So true.
Yeah, Echo Boy, that's my go-to delay. That's one of the best ones. If you
It
ask
is.
me.
Just very versatile, and it sounds good. Like I rarely find myself not being able to make it work. That's why I go for it all the time.
Yeah, that's the same thing. That's like if you got like multiple delays in your session, you're gonna probably use the Echo Boy more than anyone. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like if you literally got like 4 or 5 different ones, you're probably gonna use Echo Boy like twice over the you know what I mean?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I really like Valhalla delay a lot.
Which one?
I like Valhalla delay a
Oh
lot.
yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Yeah, that's a real good one.
I'm sure everybody does it here. And I was thinking about like, as we're talking about the, on the verb side of things, like, oftentimes, why having a short and a long is important. It's not just to pick either or for a particular thing, set it and forget it. But oftentimes, like I'll do a very, very short reverb on a lead vocal during verses, say, and then I'm switching either to the same verb with a longer setting for different parts of the song, or even potentially a different verb with a different time for a different part of the song, just to like help it solidify in the particular section. Sometimes like, yeah, too much stuff going on, you got to have it super short. I'm just looking for space, like an ambience thing. And then you have some big chorus that comes in, and then you can have some cool tails, and then maybe some extra delays, and picking and choosing when to use those versus just like saying, I have to use one, which one do I use? You don't have to be in, a super like textbook kind of way, but being able to pick and choose, what and then when to use it, I think is an important thing for all the kids out there in TV land.
I do the same exact thing. In fact, I think of it as contrast. Because it's great for that. Like you could take you don't even necessarily have to have doubles. You could have just one single vocal for the chorus, one single vocal for the verse, and based on how you choose your delays, it will create the contrast. You could get the chorus to sound bigger with a different setting of a delay, and you can make the verses sound a little smaller, so you could create that contrast and that separation between the two. So it's great for delays. Like they're really good at adding the depth and making the vocal sound big.
Yeah.
Great.
And don't forget the pre-delay. All of that makes tremendous difference. instruments versus vocals, and if you're doing any sound design or doing any film work, like, you know, that little bit of a difference of 5 to 10 milliseconds of something on a vocal. I mean, I just think about like I'll Always Love You, Whitney Houston, and that's like 480L large hauled #1, you know, stock preset with just 20-25 millisecond of pre-delay, and you hear the vocal and then you hear the tail. It's not like getting stepped on, and it's why it's such a powerful, impactful, like musical moment. It's just that voice, and it sounds longing. It sounds like, you know, it is the sound of that entire record, you know, that and Ricky Lawson one bass drum solo, you know.
Yeah. I think that, you know, you're right though. The pre-delay, that's such a critical aspect to not drowning out the vocals.
Yeah.
You know, it's both. It's pre-delay and decay, but I would almost argue that your pre-delay is more important, because what it will do is it will wash out the initial transient coming in, which to me is super, super important, you know, in terms of how things hit. And so getting those pre-delays set correctly could literally make or break, you know, how it turns out in terms of sound.
Yeah, I agree.
The preset calculator. Oh, dish.
A pre-delay calculator is great. I use that a lot for pre-delays, but a lot of times I also just like turn the pre-delay up until it feels good, because sometimes it's not. Sometimes like a little more or a little less. I usually find like slightly more than what's on time. It like kind of feels nice. It's almost like a drag, but like it's a good one for like if you want something very precise.
Yeah.
But you can all, you know, we've probably all done it as well. Like you can also use the pre-delay and create delay-like effect with it. Just stretch that thing out a little bit more, and you know, and you can have things that are like timed to the track for sure. And that's like kind of doing the old calculations of, you know, 1,000 milliseconds. Okay, what's the BPM? Figuring out those times. I'll definitely do calculations a lot on like snares and things like that. Trying to like, especially if it's a short snare, trying to make it just, if it feels like it needs a little bit more length, like timing it just enough before the next beat. So kind of getting the pre-delay behind the transient and the tail to end before the next transient begins. And those are all like BPM specific.
Yeah.
Just makes it feel bigger without stepping on anything.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of, this is complete side note and doesn't have anything to do with reverb, but this technique added a lot of texture to my reverbs, and I think it's commonly known in Pro Tools users, and I know all four of us are, but we all use the lo-fi on a snare and just do like 1% noise, sometimes 1% distortion. It's like a cheat code for all this like texture in the reverb. I'll put that on the snare and then reverb the snare, and there's just, I don't know, that like you know what I'm talking about. It just adds this like decay to it, that it's just, it makes the snare sound a lot bigger. I've been doing that.
There's like extra goosh that it pulls. That's even like a thing, you know, I'll often only verb like the bottom snare mic on some stuff, you know, and that kind of helps again. So you're getting all the smack and thwack. I mean, you're talking about if it's an acoustic drum, you know, you get that hit and, you know, you can still hear the integrity of the drum itself. And then you get the sizzle out of the bottom, and then sometimes decaying just that. And it, man, I just think about, you know, some of those like 80s Tom Petty records.
That's what it is right there.
You know, and it's just like bottom snare verb, you know, some old plate and somebody's, you know, that's out in the shed behind the studio.
Yeah, I worked with Christian Stonehouse. I think I talked about him, but he did the remake to the Block and Turner track, Taking Care of Business.
Oh yeah.
And like he has a lot of those old, like he came from like the 70s and 80s, so he's got like all those tricks that they used back then. And I learned that lo-fi trick from him because he would send me, we did a lot of collaborations years ago, and he would send me back some of the mixes, and I'm like, what are you doing to the snare, dude? There's this like beautiful texture I didn't have in mind. And he's like, yeah, it's just like 1% noise, sometimes 1% distortion or saturation, you know, use your ear, and then reverb it. and it does just what you're saying. It's that and that little like washed out like cool little tail that comes after. You know, it just adds a lot of cool texture.
Yeah, it's like that big old disco splat. You know, makes
Yep.
everything sound like a Cameo record or something like that. I love it. You know, just fat and flat.
Yeah, it's not too common in hip hop. Like they especially in like trap style beats, it's more clicky snares.
Yeah,
But that's always been my complaint with it. It's like you're missing the bottom. You're missing all that texture. You know, that like that thud and then the little washed out sound that comes after it. So I always try to apply that to all my beats. I really do my best, even with the clicky ones. Like I want that texture at the bottom. I always think of it as the bottom of the snare.
you could start a whole new movement now. It's like do a bunch of trap stuff, but with like low pitch snares.
Yeah, exactly.
That'll be your thing. You'll be the guy for that. You know.
I mean, I've been trying it forever. I don't feel like I've achieved exactly what's in my brain, but it's coming. It's definitely coming. I'm gonna dial in a snare and maybe change trap music forever.
Good.
What up, Dwizer? What's going on, man? Wait, you got any special projects going on? HB, who are you working with now? You working with Will Smith or what?
That'd be cool as long as Chris Rock ain't got nothing to do with it. You know what I'm saying?
It's got that real slappy snare sound.
Yeah, slappy. Some reason with Will, man, there's a whole lot of slapping going on in his records. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on, man. First thing we got in the studio, he was like, "I wanted to slap." Oh man. But yeah, I got a few records that I've been working on. I just did something with he was featured on a record, but like Juvenile was featured on a record from Cash Money, you know, back in the day. What else I had that was like super interesting? It's a few records. My mind kind of blank right now, but it's him. It's like two records. I can't think of it right now. It'll come to me though. But I just been besides working, I just been working on a lot of Atmos stuff. Like I've been doing that more and more and more, and always just perfecting the mix, trying to see how to you know, push the envelope. You know.
That's right, y'all. HB does Atmos. So make sure to give him a follow. I get a lot of questions from people in the chat, engineers doing Atmos. So HB is completely set up for it. So hit him up if anybody's interested.
Yeah, I think the Wiser was saying we was talking about an interface. I don't remember which one it was, but I used Emerging Happy one, so I used that one. So that's my go-to interface. So.
Dude, show us your spaceship, can you?
Oh yeah. I got a new piece coming in, so I kind of it's coming in, so I kind of was taking some stuff down, but let me show. Let's see. I'll do this one. So I mean, this is my rig, you know, that I have as far as that. But then, you know, that's my mixing console, and you know,
HB.
Pretty much
Camera.
It's not on? Oh, hold on. Oh, here we go. All right. So, you know, that's my mixing rig and Atmos one and my compressor, and then my console, 32 channel icon, and then, you know, we got everything else in there. So, so I be at home, you know.
But you do have your empty right on top of your stands, like me.
That's my Atmos one, so. And then everything else just go through there. Huh?
Did you just get that happy, or no? You always had it, huh?
No, I had that one. Yeah, I always had that one. So yeah. So I got another piece coming in right here. So I had to like kind of do some wiring and stuff like that. So let's get that figured out.
You got to watch out on the icon. They have the do to all button that's on the center section. Mm-hmm. I've seen some people get punked by that. If anybody ever like worked on one of the older Avid or DigiDesign desk, there's a button that says do to all. Be very careful. I used to like put tape over it. You know, it's like don't touch.
Don't touch that one.
Yeah. So what does it do? It erases everything you did.
Whatever command that you may be giving if you hit the do to all and then you hit the delete
Oh,
button.
dude, oh, got you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to hit that one.
Yeah. It's like, it's cool maybe if you ever want, I mean, if you ever wanted to have some utility, but it's probably for whatever utility it would give, it offers, way more potential danger than any
Yeah.
benefit.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't know it had that.
Yeah, like years ago, I spent a ton of time on the icons and that, back when they were strapped with a bunch of the digi design, like the digi trees. And it's cool. Like at the time you could do like 64 channels and you're doing like scoring sessions and orchestra stuff and like that. And great to have it. But yeah, that I got burned early hitting that button. I didn't know it was there. And I was just like, what just happened to all my tracks?
That's a
Yeah.
nightmare.
Fortunately, yeah, I was able to like, go back and get it, but it was like, I had to have a quick wardrobe change after that, So I was like, oh.
Yeah, that's when your heartbeat skips a couple of beats, huh?
Yeah, for sure.
I was gonna get a Yukon, and then HB was so generous to point out the Big Six to me. And bro, that changed my life, man. I love this thing. It's perfect for my workflow.
Yeah, it's a beast, man. Mine, I didn't show it in the video, but mine's sitting right next to me because I had to unhook it for so I could get access to everything. But I mean, times have changed, technology changed often, and I think it should be the center of your studio, the centerpiece. I believe it's the way to go.
Yeah, it's a real deal. Like, especially like it's perfect for like home studios and like smaller setups. It's great for it.
Yeah. I kind of feel bad for people who spent like 50, 60, 70, 80, 90,000, 100,000 on the console when you can just get this bad boy right now and then and it's great. And what a lot of people don't know is it's a converter too. So it's I think that's what really outside of the SSL sound, that's what makes it even more special, that it's a converter. So no more 40, 50 cables of whatever you prefer to run a console, to like your IOs and everything like that. So it's a game. It's definitely a game changer.
It's funny.
Yeah,
so good.
It's just the unique thing about this board is it hooks up with a USB-C. That's it. You hook it up and it's good to go. And then it's got its own like patch bay in the back, where you could utilize your own inserts. And to me, I'm just like, oh, they did a great job at merging, an analog board into the digital world. You get kind of best where it's really easy to hook up, and manage it.
It's funny, man. For anybody that's had the experience of doing an analog console or an install with that, I mean, you factor in, especially if you're talking like a nice, you're the audio knight there. If you are talking about like, let's say a 32 channel analog desk, anything of that scope and larger, I'm trying to tell a story here, people. The last place I was, the console, it was 48 channel API Legacy Plus, like fully loaded. That desk itself was like $427K for the facility, and another 30 grand in custom cabling for, Elco to all the stuff in the patch bay, and then all the stuff of getting into conversion, out of conversion, and being able to utilize all the stuff that's on the desk itself, and the beauty of the routing. If you got an SSL 48, like a duality, you're probably going to spend even more because there's maximum amount of routing options on there for you, and that's great. But yeah, I mean, even just like, I just dropped like $2,000 with Redco to, get me some better interconnects for, 7 or 8 pieces of gear and some stuff for patching and that, just to be able to have it in the bay, so you don't have to sit there and crawl behind stuff, which is probably even more of a pain. But yeah, like that cable, you pull one, and you're pulling on a big old thread of everything else. And
Yeah, yeah. And with a lot the reason one of the things I say about the Big Six, which is dope, is that and Rob, I don't know if you even know, but you can connect two of them.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that, dude.
And
Yeah.
it's just, I mean, you talking about. I don't think it's exactly 32 channels, but just around there, I think it gives you about, because of the extra channels you can't really utilize, but at least give you about 30 channels. Man, that's more than enough these days, you know.
Yeah, 28, I think it'd be like 28, 30 channels.
28, something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah. And you're right. Like that'd be more than enough. If you're doing a mix, you could figure it out. I mean, I do fine with the 16. Um, because that's the best thing about it is we have digital, so you
yeah,
could prep it all digitally and then route it, in groups and whatnot, and work around the amount
yeah,
of channels you use. But to get two,
yeah.
and that would solve all your issues.
One side could be used for production, the other side could be just used for all vocals. You know
Yep.
what I'm saying? And I mean, that's like best of both worlds, really. And then you talking about just two Thunderbolt cables
so,
compared to again, a whole bunch of LXRs or TSRs,
Yeah, fraction of the price,
Yeah.
getting just as good of a sound. And really this is like my goal this year is I'm going to end up getting some, I want to get some effects, like analog effects, maybe like the stereo delay, some reverbs and whatnot, and then route them into the inserts and then use them in parallel.
Yeah.
And so now I have that ability to do this. And like when I was using UAD, not to say it was bad, but it was just always weird stuff went on where I'm like dealing with some latency issue or just something isn't communicating correctly. Like I just always, and it worked right one day, the next day it wasn't. I haven't really experienced that much on the SSL. It's just solid. The thing is, it does what I need it to do, and that's how it's way less of a headache on me.
I was just looking at the price, like Sweetwater, $2,700. I mean, that's a tremendous value for what you're getting on there. And even like the bus comp, I mean, you don't have all of the feature set of like a G bus or something like that,
Right.
but it has the thing on there, you know. And then just all the the IO capability. The pre's are super clean.
Yep.
I mean, that's even like I've got a couple of those the 6 channel strips. It's some of like the comp and the EQ. It's kind of it's limited, but man, it does what most of the time you'll need it to do. Unless you're like this really more for on the tracking side. But yeah, I'm sure like you slap your 47 into that pre. And if you want to crunch it up, you can or not. And it's great. The thing you're saying though with the UAD, like, I nuked all my stuff except for the satellite because I've got so many plugs and like other sessions that are relying. If I have to go back, like I need to power those plugins somehow. But I mean, they have a calculator that's on there that'll show people like what the inherent latency is of each plug, and that's something to be aware of. But I've talked to a couple of the guys, Drew over there, and there's every now and then, man, there's things like, just like you're saying, there's weird bugs that are on there. I love the plugs. I think they sound great. They're some of the best available. But yeah, you'll open up a session one time and it's like, what's going on here? This is weird. And then you just got to close everything out, open it again, and then it's fine. There's no real way of like troubleshooting what just went wrong. I just hope it's not doing it when you're doing a mix down of something. You're relying on that, and time is money. I don't need to have something that's going to be like, I don't know if it's going to work today. That kind of stuff gives me a little bit of, little tummy trouble at times thinking about it.
Yeah, I also like, I don't know if I was right about this or not. And there's so many things that this could be. It could be a bad cord. There's just, you know what I mean? Like, there could even be a circuit within my compressor that, or a tube is wrong or whatever, right? But I just didn't feel like I got I don't get the same sound out of my compressors going into my UAD as I get out of my SSL. And that could be, the circuitry that's passed through the SSL. There's many factors that this could be, right? But I don't get the same sound. My compressors sound a lot more brittle going into my UAD than they do my SSL.
Like
And
using
so,
their G-Bus version?
No,
Like,
no. When I so I'll take my LA2A
oh,
and
okay.
I have it routed into my SSL, and I'll
Mhm.
use it as an insert. It's a lot cleaner in my SSL than it is through my UAD.
Oh, I got you. Yeah.
Yeah, and like
Circuits, man.
like
You
a
know.
lot of
Yeah,
the
circuitry.
circuits
Oh, the
for sure.
circuitry.
Yeah, and that was like the one thing I just noticed right off the bat. I'm like, well, even the analog gear, my outboard analog gear sounds better through this thing. Like right off the bat, I'm getting a bump in quality, and to me, it's just like it was worth it across the board from all of those aspects. Like just not to mention that the price of it alone is like holy crap.
Yeah.
You know,
For what you're
you get
getting, for sure.
yeah, for what you're getting and the price, wow. And then it hooks up on one cord. It's like, okay. And then you could just patch it in with, right into the board. Like, okay. and then hit one button and it works as an insert. So I could utilize all of my outboard gear now as an insert through the board with one button. And it's accurate. Like I don't really, there's no latency. I mean, well, how they built this board to me is just like everything I envisioned of what I wanted, and it just made my job a lot easier. Troubleshooting through the UAD, it just became a pain to me.
Yeah. I had some issues on mine, and like one of the major reasons that I still went with the UAD, kind of or tired from one facility, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go independent on my own, and it made a lot of sense, being able to track through plugs, and I've got a decent amount of analog gear as well, and the very low latency monitoring. I don't know if all of that was totally worth it. And everything has its costs and its benefits as well. But yeah, there's some stuff though that's I still think is buggy, and they've got great ads, and they got a lot of big names that have pushed the stuff. It's like anything that's out there, but I think there is a reliability issue, on some of that, and especially like I'm doing a tracking session tonight, and it's going to be 22 probably inputs up front, so I have to have the channel count to be able to accommodate that. But yeah, and, switching to the links, I got no issues. I mean, I've got to go back to like tracking 32 as the playback engine, and low latency monitoring and all that kind of stuff. And so there's a bit of a trade-off, but just the pure reliability of it, and like you said, like having it inserted into an actual console versus a hardware insert. I mean, it's doing something, and then there's still a round trip thing that you had to deal with, and I mean, maybe that's a thing that it's also just smearing the time, just a hair. So I'm waiting. If the Big Six came out with something that would, like, if you could incorporate, I've got the UF8 and the UC1 and all that. Like, if you could incorporate like the UF8 automation stuff and the motorized faders into a Big Six, dude. And I was gonna ask you, like, how high is the clock? I mean, can you go 192, or is it 96? Is it capped?
6. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, great. You know what I mean? Like, unless you're doing like some major, orchestral thing. Yeah. 96 is more than enough. Yeah. Like, we're not really worrying about hard drive space these days. Man, if you could get that for a price that comes in less than, what's the desk that they have that has all the 500 series inserts? They call it a dumb console, a dumb smart console. It doesn't have DAW control on it. Like, if you could incorporate that for
Origin? Is it the Origin?
Yeah, the organ. I think.
Yeah,
the organ.
Yeah. And that thing's cool. I still don't think that it can be. You can do automation on it. But yeah, if you had the Big Six with automatable faders and have it as a DAW control as well, dude, yeah. I would be. I'd seriously look at that for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you're right. Like, I think ultimately my issue is it's that communication between all the wires, the go around thing. Like, the Big Six eliminates that, and that's where a lot of latency comes from. Is if things aren't communicating efficiently and fast, things just fall off. If we have like a 20-second latency or 20 millisecond latency in
Because that's a huge
yeah,
latency.
like, holy crap.
That's like TV broadcast delay,
that they gave way after the signal. But I mean, I get really, really short amount of latency could cause like all kinds of things to go haywire, and you wouldn't even recognize it. You wouldn't even you'd be like, it just doesn't sound right, but like, what's going on? And that's like the big thing that the Big Six did for me is just right off the bat. I just eliminated all that stuff for me. So it's like anything that causes less of a headache for me and smooths out my workflow. Yeah, I'm going that direction.
Brandon, you've got Carbon, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you have any weird issues with inserts or anything like that on there? Or any latency oriented stuff?
No, nothing with. Honestly, I have no complaints about the Carbon at all. Like, it's great. Works DSP with Pro Tools, so I don't have any latency with tracking. And I usually don't really use any plugins while I'm tracking anyway. Like maybe I'll throw on like some of the bomb factory compressors if I'm doing vocals or whatever, just for them to hear more consistent. But like, it's great. The conversion sounds awesome. The mic pre's sound dope. They're really clean. Got 4 headphone outs. It's sick. And like, if I wanted to get like 8 channels of something that has ADAT to expand, like the new SSL Octo that just came out has ADAT on it, which could be like a cool like mic pre thing. Oh, you got that? Yeah.
Yeah.
That or like the OPX8 from Neve, like that.
Yeah.
That could be cool. Like something that I can ADAT expand into it. I think I might actually be able to do more than 8. I might be able to do 16. I'm not 100% sure. But it's great, man. Like, yeah, I got no complaints about it.
Yeah, I mean, you do drums at your place, right? Or do you have to go somewhere else for that?
No, I do drums in my place.
Yeah. All right. So, I mean, there's a call to have that many inputs, that many channels of conversion for that. I mean, usually it's always like, if you're doing live drums, then you're always at a channel count issue to where like you could have some great, small interface, the Neumann or one of the small emerging ones. But yeah, if you need channels, then you're always looking at like, okay, well, how do I get it? How do I get it with minimal latency? How do I get it, with the best monitoring possible? And
Yeah.
always the toss up.
Yeah. It's nice because like they're clean. I don't have to commit to like a color, and I can always like rerun them through the Neve afterwards if I wanted to. You know what I mean? I've done that before. I mean, sometimes I don't feel like doing that because I don't really feel like I need it all the time. But like, yeah, I think the only thing, like if I were to get something like 8-channel, like an 8-channel pre that I could ADAT expand into, it would be nice to have like the color option. But it's cool. I got 3 monitor selectors. Like I could, you know what I mean? Like I don't have 3 monitors. I only got and Atri, I was going to say earlier, like I saw you had the iLouds on top of your NS10s, and I have literally the same thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's nice. Like it's a great monitor controller too. Yeah, I got no complaints.
We did get a question, which I get this question often, and I'm kind of curious to see how each one of you would respond. Does having a mixing board change the sound?
Yes,
Absolutely.
totally. If it's analog circuitry
Absolutely.
versus just a controller, which is
Big mouse.
effectively a big mouse. Yeah, if you any console you have is going to add its inherent, analog characteristics.
Yeah.
I think also, I think what's important, right, is with a console compared to not, it changes your mixing perspective, right? Because I think without a console, you're really, as far as a lot of stuff, now there's endless ways to do stuff, right? But a lot of times I think what the focus is when you don't have a console is at the mix bus. right?
Mhm.
I think a lot of people mix from the mix bus, right? But when you have a console, you're mixing from the channels itself.
Yep.
So I think the concept is completely different. The way you attack it is different, and it is you can get to as long as it sounds good, that's all that matters. You know what I'm saying? But how you get there, everyone has their different preferences. But when you start mixing from the channel, I think you would see a big difference in your mix, like compared to from the mix bus. Like, it's a big difference. It's night and day to me.
Yeah. I've like completely stopped using compression on my two bus. Just like
Yeah,
altogether. Like I have like almost nothing on my two bus. I mix into this like Sontec setting that I really like, and then that's it. Like I'll Pro L2 and like maybe I'll have gold clip before that, but like that's kind of it. And then like after I feel like the mix is good, like I might throw like Ozone Imager on there.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
it.
yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it's just when you for people mixing the box, it's kind of, even though you can put plugins and stuff on the channel, that's a whole between analog and digital. That's a whole like world of conversation. But um, a lot of, I mean, just when you're in the box, a lot of stuff you can do is just from the mixing bus. From the mix bus. But when you got a console, you getting the sound right from the channels compared to at the end. You know.
I would ask, I would say this, and also ask you, HP, because and I've got, a small control surface. You've got a larger control surface. Even if it's not an analog console, like my experience from an analog console, and then coming to a control surface, I'm mixing, I'm listening, I'm just you might not even realize you're doing it. You're just like touching a fader, you're kind of pushing it up, you're pulling it down, you're adjusting a pan, and you go about your business of mixing, to where, like, if you're on a mouse and you have to physically kind of stop your flow and you're telling your brain, grab mouse, point to this, click drag that, it seems like, yeah, you're often not looking at a per channel basis. When I'm on a large format desk, I can just sit there and kind of, you just touch something, you move it a little bit here, a little bit there, and I think that is not only a sound, but it's a complete workflow
Yeah.
change, being able to grab faders.
No, absolutely. And I mean, I like, and I use Pro Tools, so I mean, the consoles can get crazy, but um, I just love the icon because it's not nothing you can't do in Pro Tools on this board.
Right.
I get access to every element of a plugin. Obviously you got faders. It's endless stuff. Like I forget half the stuff this board can do. But then I have my console to do the other stuff. So it's like the best of both worlds for what I could do. But I just noticed, like we was talking about, and you're absolutely correct. When you got that console, when you could just focus on that channel and get the sound right, it's stuff you don't even have to do on the back end compared to where engineers are like loading their mix bus with enhancers and enhancements, and then trying to figure out what the issue is when mixing records.
That's what we were talking about at the very beginning of this.
Yeah. I love how you brought that up, though, HB. I think that that is something to really think about for engineers out there, because that's like the difference of way they were doing it back then versus now. Is like we work on groups a lot of times, trying to get that right, when the engineers back in the day, they're on each separate channel and getting every sound polished.
Yeah.
And that was like a big difference in how they mix back then versus today. And so that's what I love, even you saying like best of both worlds, because now we have the ability to do both, and if you can merge the two, like this could speed up workflow and so on and so forth. But understanding the two differences, if you get all of your sounds right on each separate channel, and those are already sitting well in the mix, like you're not going to need much on the group. Just what Brandon's saying, I don't need to throw compression on there anymore. I don't need much of that. It's already right. It's already sitting right.
Yeah, and I mean, you see now, like, I mean, it's always a like crazy world, but I mean, like engineers, I would say like people who get into engineering the last few years, right? Is going to get a computer, a laptop, or something, and then get some plugins, right? And then as you progress and you pick your IOs and stuff like that, and if you start getting into analog gear, you pretty much gonna be doing hardware inserts, and that's kind of what you was talking about, how you was doing it. We all done it, but for the majority of the part, I mean, I think a lot of people will put stuff on their mix bus,
Yep.
and then just try to fine tune their mix from their mix bus. And when you got an issue, I mean, everything you do on a mix bus affects everything, right? So how can you? It makes it difficult to fix stuff because everything decisions you're making is affecting everything that you're doing. So it's just like approaching concepts and everything like that. But when you got a console, you're really focusing on whatever that source is on that channel, and again, you'll do stuff more upfront, more so than the back end, compared to like when you're in the box, you're kind of doing a lot on the back end to try to compensate from that. And
Yeah.
We were talking about this a little bit last week, where there's coming from an analog background, you never talked about saturation or adding this or having to add that. It's like the gear just already kind of did it, and it was sort of inherent that you were mixing, and tracking, knowing that it was there. And you're talking about like now everybody like, doing the thing on the two bus, and then mixing into that, and it's like it's a way of doing it. I'm not going to sit there and like dunk on that, but you're so right, and it's like it's important for the newer mixers that are out there. It's like some of the people that you'll see online that will talk about that first thing I do is I put this on my two bus and I mix into it. They're not generally mixing the quality of tracks that the pro guy that might mix into a two bus is doing. We were talking earlier, it's like you might be getting just a bunch of random ideas from somebody recorded with a 2i2, through an amp pod or something like that. And the sounds might not be that great coming in. And then saying, well, if I just put it on my two bus, it'll fix everything. It's like, no, it probably makes it significantly worse, or it has a potential of making it much worse than like still addressing quality tones on a per channel basis, how they interact, and then how does it go to the mix bus? I get nervous when I see young guys. Oh, I just mix into my. We were dogging on earlier. Like I mix into my my God particle. That's the first thing I do. I'm like, I don't know what that ad is. Somebody says it, and I'm like, are you sure you do that? Like, really? It's like, okay, whatever they're paying you for the endorsement. Hey, I ain't gonna hate on it, but I wouldn't say that's the best advice for somebody.
Yeah, no. No. It's a cool tool, but
Yeah. That's all it is right there.
It's a cool tool. If you really dig into what everything else is, you'll see that. How can I say? You can see how much you don't need the God particle.
Right.
Yep.
I think that would be a great way of putting it. If you really dive in, you'll see how much you really don't need the God particle.
Very, very true.
Yo, guys, I gotta run.
Right on, dude.
So
Appreciate you, man.
All right, Brandon, man.
later.
We got a question, and we could wrap this up here soon. But I think this is a good question Rachel's asking. Did you guys go to college for engineering or learn as you go?
I'm self-taught.
What about you, Brian?
So I was a music major as a drummer, and then all of the audio stuff came from, largely being self-taught, reading a bunch of books. Then I think I told you early on, and when I started joining this, like I was trading some session time at a discounted rate. There's a studio that I was recording a lot of commercial stuff, and saying, hey, can I basically intern? And they had in-house like arranging that would hire the session players. I'm like, I'll cut you a deal on my rate if you let me hang out. And learning all that, because yeah, I had the musical ears, the musical training. I just had to figure out how the gear worked.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then I've gone all the way through, and then I ended up, I was actually teaching out at Omega for a while. You're in the, the DMV area, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's funny. It's like not going to school for it, but then I was teaching, it's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah,
it's a bit of a
Omega
weird
one of the
thing.
greats.
Yeah. It's like, I don't have a Pro Tools certificate, but I've been using it for like 20 plus
20
years.
years. Me too. Me
Yeah.
too.
Some of that stuff, and if is it Rachel? Is that who it is?
Yep.
Sorry, is she the one that was like an audio student? I
I think so. Yeah. I think she's a student. Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay, yes. That's great. Go to school for all of that stuff, and I think that it's never gonna hurt you at all to have some formal education. And especially one of the things that I really enjoyed when I was teaching is I was teaching all the analog stuff. So before anybody ever, set foot in the classroom for Pro Tools, we're talking about signal flow. We're talking about basics of analog circuitry. We did some music theory. And then like getting them into the small studio at Omega. They have an old API like 3124. It's a split config console. So you have like the monitor section on one side and then the mix section on the other side with a A800 or 824, Studer machine, teaching them how to like rack tape and do all that stuff. And there's a very limited amount of outboard gear that they could use on projects. And I think like having a facility that has that ability so you can get your hands on, because what I saw in so many younger students coming in is a lot of them, had that like laptop experience, or some of them really none. They had, it's like I got a cracked version of FL Studio,
Right.
and I always try to do my absolute best to connect with them and to try to give them the stuff they're gonna need to know, not only to pass the course, but I want to be able to hire you one day.
Yeah.
So I need to give you the nuggets of information that are going to be beneficial for you, not only understanding the basics of how to do the job, but then also what's necessary to be employed, whether you're a freelancer or you're gonna if you one of the 6 people that are lucky enough to get a job at a commercial facility. But yeah, it's like HB, like when's the last time somebody asked you for your Pro Tools certificate?
Like never.
No, and it's great to learn it, to go through that process, to know that, and to the study that gives you the certificate. But like, I don't care if you have a certificate or not.
Right.
It's like, who cares?
I think honestly, and it's great, and I don't want to knock it. I don't want anybody to think I'm knocking it. Right. I think the experience that I have with engineers, right, is that engineers that go to school, they are more knowledgeable about everything, right? They know all the theories, they know everything, like circuitry, they know everything, right? Which is great. Then freelancers, well, I'm sorry, not freelancers, engineers that are like self-taught, right? They don't know that stuff, right? But they more so think outside the box. So through my years of doing it, a lot of engineers go to school. They're more like, I don't want to say, well, I would say they're like stuck into that space of what you can and can't do.
Right. This is what the textbook says.
Textbook. There you go.
Yeah.
That's what I was looking for. And then engineers are just self-taught. That's totally off the grid. They try like some stuff that you'll be like, hey, you ain't supposed to do that, and they do it, and it works. So I think that's a difference, which is both are great.
Yeah. If you get that happy medium of enough, because a lot of times, man, I can't tell you like how many times having the basic audio and electrical understanding that I learned after, some of the music stuff, like that has saved me on sessions to quickly be able to diagnose a problem, to fix it. and to not be sitting there like potentially making a situation worse. Then you start clicking through a whole bunch of settings, and it's like, no, maybe it's a bad cable with a drop pin, you know?
Right.
And if you don't know what that is, then you don't know what it is, and so you don't have any tools at your disposal.
Yeah.
But like, you know, and then having enough like knowledge that gives you also freedom to make creative choices.
Yeah.
You know, and it's almost like going back in time when you're like, you know, some of the stuff that somebody might try now, just I'm going to route this thing out and then I'm going to route it into something else. And you might not know what it is you're doing, but you're still exploring. And that's kind of how cool old school sounds came about. Had a limited, you know, pieces of gear and limited capability. So you had to be really creative in how you deployed those to make a sound happen. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna, like, you know, again, we've talked about Bruce Swedien a bunch. Like, you know, one of his earlier sessions, he talked about, you know, before he passed, and he's like, he wanted to record this trombone solo on a big band thing, but he had the player go in and stand in the corner and with no direct miking. And he's like, yeah, man, like I heard the sound as the guy's walking around the room. And I'm like, that's the sound for the solo. And, you know, having enough knowledge of how to get it, and then enough freedom to say, yeah, man, whatever. Like if you go with the total no rules,
Oh,
probably you're gonna get yourself into trouble. Like you gotta, like, I don't want to be like the total gearhead. You have to know how your stuff works.
right.
And then from there, you know, like learn that much, learn your basic Pro Tool commands. Man, there'll be times when like I'm still like, oh, I forget what the hotkey for that is. I got to hit the drop down menu, you know, edit, go over to, oh yeah. You know, tab, you know, it's like whatever the case is, you know, like I'll still do that, but it doesn't slow you down. But if you don't know to look for it, then that's where, like, you know, you can end up in some trouble.
You'll definitely forget more than you learn.
Oh yeah, that's for sure.
Oh man.
Yeah, I'll say this too, is that my knowledge is very pieced up, and I've worked in a lot of studios, but I think most of the knowledge I've gained that actually works is being around people like, you know, HB, people like you, people like Dan, and all the other engineers, is when I finally kind of got out of like the school aspect and the technical terms of it and getting around experienced engineers. Like HB put it perfectly. They think outside the box a lot of times. And like, you know, when we go and speak with Dan, he's going to tell us something entirely different from another engineer. And so when you're you know, around these spaces, you get to like, I get to listen to how HB does it, right? And I like his sound. You know, like I'm going to try out your technique and then maybe try out Dan's technique, and you could, you know, based information from two very experienced engineers with a great sound, you know, you could dial in those sounds. So it's way beyond school. I think school will give you the foundation, but getting around experienced engineers will like truly get you off to the races. That's my perspective.
Yeah. If you can find a program that is reputable, doesn't cost a lot, I think there's some benefit to that for sure. Again, totally not dunking on it. You know, and I wish it was like when I was, you know, younger, where you could go get a job interning at a studio, you know, being a runner, you know, doing the, you know, one day if somebody was like, you know, too hungover to come in for a session. I mean, how many dudes do you hear like, you know, caught their break that way? And I think Sylvia Massey was in one of those, like she was doing the late night lockout sessions at some place, you know, when they're like, you know, some band just randomly rolls in because they can get the midnight to 10 a.m. slot for super cheap, you know, it ends up being like a hit record, you know.
Right.
Like those opportunities aren't there anymore as far as like big grade commercial facilities. And even you see like, you know, Greasy with stuff, and, you know, he's probably one of the last younger guys, you know, to have an internship. Like, dude, I mean, I know he totally earned it, but like, how many people, you know, try to get into East West? You know what I mean? Yeah. You're just not like, you're not getting, there's, man, the budgets aren't there for it. And, you know, these places, you know, they close down, and it's like, you know, pretty, you know, they're just trying to get sessions in the door to keep the lights on.
Yeah.
Rather than when it's like, oh, let's get an intern in here, you know, because we got so much work, you know, that we could benefit from it. So.
Yeah, I think our business is changing a lot. I actually had the pleasure of going to speak at Berkeley a couple of weeks back.
Look at
And
you.
Look at that.
that was a
Look
surreal moment. I was kind of nervous walking into that, but speaking to the students and I ask all the students a lot of questions, and when I was speaking to the students, it just gave me this perspective of how much our industry is changing. And I think you just detailed it out there is that like not a lot of them are looking for internships, and what they're looking for is like I just want to learn how to do this so I could go home and build my own.
Yeah.
And
I
I'm
think
seeing this
that's
like
that's a new intern.
yeah, it's the new intern. Exactly. It is the new intern. And that's
Will's got an intern, right? I think he
I
had
think
somebody
so.
that he had, and maybe he's plucking a couple, and that's Mike. He was on it. It's like his assistant, and I'm like, man, you all have an assistant? That's nice.
Yeah, Will has Corbin. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Corbin. I remember. Yeah, totally. Will has one. Like they still exist for sure.
Yeah.
I think when you look at our industry as a whole, especially in terms of like the product they're selling, right? We're not gearing it. They're not gearing it towards like big major studios. Like, not to say that they aren't building stuff for that, but most of the marketing is being done towards the home studios.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like a big thing to think about these days is that like you're going to get a lot of people that are going to go and learn how to do this and then just go back to their own studios and either do it for their own music or create a client list and produce and engineer for people. And so I don't know what this means for the major studios, but like we're going to see this more and more in the future for sure.
Well, that's why I think the information right now it's so big now. Like when you look at like master classes and stuff like that, now it's about the information, and that's what's being sold. It's because like you said, back in the day, it was you go intern for a studio, and then you work on the room and you work on the equipment, and you get all your trial and errors and stuff like that, and there's someone there that can assist you, right? If you have any questions or that could correct you, right? And now it's like now is the new intern is you get the equipment and you get the information and work on it at home,
Right.
and that's just what it is.
Look what James wrote. I think that's something very interesting and very true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still.
It breaks my heart a little bit, and and not to say any studios or anything, but I have a good friend of mine that owns a very, very busy studio and been crushing it for over a decade. And he called me like a couple of months ago and struggling a bit, and kind of called me for just wanted to bounce ideas off me, And he's a hustler. He'll be fine, but it made me really think deep. I'm like, what he told me was this, is that a lot of his older client base, or his client base is older now. They're having kids, they're transitioning in life and doing other things. And so they're kind of walking away from music. And he's like, I'm not seeing the new wave come in. The younger people come in. He's like, it isn't what it was 10 years ago. And I don't know if this is across the board. Like, of course, this is just one story, right? One experience, but it made me think about it. It made me think deep about it. And it's like, how true is this across the board? Number one. And then how much more is this going to become true as we walk into the future? What does this mean for how music is going to be made and distributed and consumed? Like, what does this mean? I think us three are kind of already sitting in where it's going. Like
Right.
We're all sitting in our studios right now, right? And when I look at that objectively, I'm trying not to put my biased opinion on it, but taking an objective standpoint on it, it's like I think it's inevitable at this point that it's gonna mostly go home studios and remote work.
Well, coming from like a band background, playing in bands well before, there was any really reliable home studio solution. I mean, besides like, your Tascam Porta Studio or, the early like was the like you can get like they had the Layla 8x8 card you could put in for your your 386 Pentium PC, something like that. As a musician, you had to go to a studio. There wasn't really an option, and you had to say, okay, well, we're a band, and studio's going to cost money. We call it around, and we can get the late night lockout for $400 for 10 hours. And we get to walk away with whatever the mix is and a CD or a cassette, as you go out the door, like all inclusive, 10-hour block of something. And they'd go do gigs and they'd save up some money and they'd be somewhat rehearsed because you're paying for that session time. And you come in and man, you bang out your 3-song demo and you go on from there. And then that's how it was. It just as a matter of utility. There wasn't any other option. I think now you're getting it. Everybody, even musicians, most everybody's recording at home. They're recording at home for demos, whatever the case is. And they're not even thinking about, oh, I need to go to a studio. Unless you're just like, oh, I don't have enough gear to track drums. And I do a lot of just drum tracking. Somebody, hey man, can I come over and we'll track these drums down, and then they'll just take the drum tracks and go some other place. Fine by me. It's still work. That's keeping, cash coming in. But yeah, I mean, like you said, like that, we're already there, for the most part, unless you're a seasoned band already. What like practical reason would you have to go to even look for a studio when you could just record it at home? I mean, it's probably not going to be great, but that's, not until they realize that something's not great, but there's so many of those people that are, just like I'm looking for the one studio where I can intern, and there's so many bands that are, fighting to be in the space, and it's easier than ever to be in the space, so it's a giant stovepipe that I think that we've sort of organically created. And yeah, you're right. Like we're already in it, dude.
It's already here, yeah. And like, this is the only thing I would say for anybody out there that is trying to get into this and you're still maybe struggling with sound, is don't be afraid to reach out to people like Reference and HB. These people have tons and tons of experience. That's the thing we cannot take out of the equation. I understand doing it on your own at home, but don't fail yourself at the education and understanding how to do it correctly, and yeah. I think, at least from my standpoint, the pivotal moment in my career was probably in like 2005 when I actually went to a real studio and worked with a real producer and engineer and heard what they could do for my music. Right. It was this like holy crap moment of like, yeah, okay, I'm not doing it right. Now I got to figure out how to do this. And so that's like one thing you don't want to avoid. Like if you're going to build your own studio, I would say this: educate your mind first. Spend the money first to get educated on how to do it. Then save up to build the studio so you could record yourself correctly, and then maybe hire an engineer to mix it while you're learning how to engineer. And this right here could avoid a big, what you're doing is you're creating a large learning curve for yourself. It could smooth out that playing field, that if you're hiring people and you're trying to build a fan base, that your quality of music is going to dictate how many fans are going to like your music. And so try to avoid putting the bad sounding tracks out, right? Like teach yourself, learn this. But
don't release something that sucks.
Yeah, exactly. Like at least the tracks that you're putting out are like, okay, these are competing with the pros, and so don't avoid, like I said, reaching out to these guys, even seeing if they offer classes, or like say, hey, I got to set up at home and I just don't know how to record myself. Can I get on a consultation with you, to like look at my setup and like teach me to do the levels and like show me proper microphone techniques and like, am I in the right position in my room? All of those things. You don't want to just figure this out on your own. Again, you're just creating this large learning curve for yourself. And like, it might take you 10 years to get over that curve, right? When you could just hire someone to teach you how to do it and get over it in a year, and this is, my perspective anyways.
You can't do it yourself. Know somebody that can.
always. It's like, I could read a book on fixing my engine, I can go buy some tools, but man, more than likely for a long period of time, I'm going to trash that motor until, I've broken it a number of times and then had to like go hire a pro to fix it. And then you're like, oh, now I know what I did wrong. But I mean, I think that the same thing can happen. I mean, and we all have gear, right? And I'm just like, this isn't like a, flex. Like, I have a good amount of gear, and some stuff, and everything that I own, 100% of it, I use all the time. As you're starting out, it's so, man, it's just like the clickbait temptation and algorithm. It's like, oh, you Googled audio interface, and now like you're getting like merging technology, spam in your inbox. You're like, maybe if I buy this $25,000 interface, my stuff will sound better when I'm recording my Attitune guitar at home, right? Like, don't buy all the stuff. Like, get a good DAW, get Pro Tools, get Logic. I would recommend either of those two first. Everything else is still good, and you can learn on everything else. But man, just like those two platforms are stable, they're solid, they've got good support, and they've got a good series of very usable plugins that come with it. And just learn on that piece of gear until you're absolutely maximizing it, and it's like, it's begging you to like, please help me expand this. You can't keep, max out the processing power and that kind of stuff. Just like, spend the time learning the craft. And as the resident old guy, you will not be good starting out. You might get lucky on some stuff, but more than likely, it's not going to be the greatest, and that's totally fine. Just keep practicing at it, keep working at it, and then do the homework. It's like, it's so easy today with everything is on demand. Like, this is an on-demand lesson. We've already given like probably thousands of dollars of information that we could have sold on a course, right?
Right.
There's all this stuff out there. There's a million YouTube videos, and let me give you my 5 tips of, go back and just listen to music and listen to music and listen to like the top 10 records in every genre of every decade, and just like, what made this a hit? Who engineered it? What was it recorded at? What kind of gear did they use there? Why does this thing sound so good? Or why does this was a hit record, but man, it's kind of, I don't know, it's a little suspect. Like, you can't replace that amount of just ear training. And then it's like it's a Rolodex, a catalog information Rolodex. Sorry. it's like a catalog, encyclopedia in your head of, I've heard something like that before. Yeah, that was on like, some, Doyle Bromhole record in the early 2000s. But I'm going to go, oh yeah, they recorded that, at Muscle Shoals. Yeah, it's the old school room. That's the why it sounded the way that it did. And you can take that information and then say, now I can go experiment, but I know there's like a jumping off point. And like, man, I'll stop rambling about it, but you just can never, the technical education is one thing, but just educating your ears on every genre possible, just become that, like, the trivia night guy that everybody knows. And it's like, actually, that was from the B-side of the 12-inch import that was only released in Japan, and it had this error on, like that kind of stuff. And it's like, and they used a different take, and he actually used a twin instead of a plexi, if you can get that underneath your belt, then I think that, man, making records is a lot easier when
Right.
your ears know what you're going for. And then, like, maybe it's my experience, but like, then you just learn gear. The gear is the easy part,
Yeah.
Like, you got to know what it's supposed to sound like.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because that just happened to me the other day. I was listening to a Maroon 5 record, And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I know how I did that. I'm going to do that to my next record. I was like looking for that, you know, and that's exactly what experience does for you is, yeah, it's a beautiful thing. I mean, and I'll just say this one thing too, because I know how easy it is to get sold things,
Yeah,
you
we all
know,
have.
especially plugin in the beginning. Just be very, very careful. And I think it would be a wiser decision to save the $20 or $50 that the game changing plugin you're about to buy and put
Total
that
game
towards the
changer.
to put that towards the budget of getting it properly mixed.
Yeah.
Because here's a whole other thing. If you have HB mix one of your records, you now have a reference of your record, of your production, of your voice that you get to use to practice your mixes. And you're not trying to compare yourself to Bieber or whoever else you're doing it to, right? And that to me is like, that is such a better perspective to have when you're referencing your songs, you know, and trying to practice, if you will. You know, when I reference, I'm just making sure I'm competing. You know, that's like, I'm not trying to change my sound. But
Right.
if you're just starting out as an engineer and you're trying to get a better sound for your music, get someone to mix it the way you like it, and then use that to train. You know, okay, listen to these vocals. Like, how did they do that? And then try to decode it with your ear and figure out how they did it. You know, and that is such a to me, it's a way better approach and probably a more efficient approach to getting better with your own music.
You know, I tell you what, I would say for anybody in here, uh, you know, not speaking for anybody else, if you want to DM me and, you know, mention, you know, SoundMindBeats on there, we'll cut a great rate for you. I'd be happy to take a song that you have that you've been struggling with and give you what I hope you consider a pro level mix and send it back to you. That you can use it for release, but you can also use it to say, okay, here's what somebody with, you know, 25 years of experience in the industry would give you, you know. And I'm HB's the big dog here. Like I'm just a dude like trying to make records, you know what I mean? Because I don't want to work in an office. So that
Thank
sucks.
you, brother. Thank you, brother.
You know, but like, yeah, you know, I'd be happy to do that. And also like, you know, and I've done, like Rob was saying, like I've set up Zoom calls with people, like send me your IO file and I'll take a look at it. And it's like, oh yeah, it's like simple things of patching and routing and, you know, why is this weird? Why is that weird? It's like, oh yeah, because it was in bypass or, you know, something like that. You're happy to look at sessions for people. And, you know, like I'm making a living, we're all making a living, but I want to help other people to make a living as well. You know, I know that feeling of seeing like a lot of the students that I was working with. And I'm not some, you know, Nostradamus future, you know, predictor or anything, but I could look in some of those classrooms and say, there's one person in here that has what it will take in order to be a professional. Like the rest of you, I hope you have fun with your hobby. You know, I never said this out loud, but it's like this inside monologue. It's like you could sit there and you could just look at, like, man,
You know.
if you were to ever make it, there's like, you're going to have to cram a lifetime's worth of knowledge into the next couple years in order for you to be, you know, remotely possible. And there's some people that, like, you know, they just want to learn it because it's fun and it's cool and something they're into. But, you know, I definitely, like, I got a soft spot for, you know, wanting to help people. And like, I don't want to sell a course, you know, that's a lot of crap to put together, man. Like, you know, but if you want one-on-ones or a mix evaluation and that kind of stuff, where I'm not going to like get your mix and post it. I like Zach Primler. Like his stuff is cool, but like, you know what you're getting into. You send him like a mix to evaluate and he's going to listen to it and be like, all right, in the first 2 seconds, dude, the snare sucks. The guitar tone is trash. Everything's out of tune, but I'll keep listening. You know, you just like, it might be good, but you might get roasted. So that's not what I'm about. I want to try to give you as much constructive help as possible. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, reach out, y'all. Like seriously, like this is if you really want to like understand how I built my career, that's how I did. Is I'd reach out to HB. You know, I want to pick their brain, however it may be. You know, and if that entails hiring them or however you need to do it, you know, that's how you get involved. And you know, don't hesitate. This is like, especially if references, you know, extending his reach. If you're interested, please do.
Reference, we in the same area, so we gotta connect, man.
Absolutely. Let's go
Yeah.
get some tacos or something.
Yeah, for sure, man. For sure, man. I'll send you my info and everything. You know, I see you right there, so we connect, man, and you know, keep making magic.
Let's go listen to other bands playing, just stand in the back being like, and they're like, who's that bald guy? I know who
Put that
HB
lo-fi
is.
on the snare, bro.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, yeah, go up to the front of house guy and be like, it's too much 250. You know, you might want to cut some of that.
Yeah, bro. Like you gotta cut that at 1 dB and then raise 30 hertz by 96 dB.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about 30 hertz these days, everybody. That's the new sauce.
30 hertz. Yeah, that's the new
What's the left
sauce.
side? Only in the left ear.
Nah, for sure.
Spanish, we're into everything actually. Like I know you know, HB does a lot of hip hop, but he'll mix anything. I know Brian could do anything. It doesn't matter what genre it is. I don't know what sort of preference of music you listen to, but in terms of music we can do, I know HB can do any genre. I know Brian can do any genre. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, Spanish Town. Like, yeah, I've done a bunch of classical. Like, you know, I don't know if I even like, told you. Like, you know, part of my backstory. Like, I was in the Army for a long period of time with the U.S. Army band. Like, it's right outside of D.C.
Oh, wow.
And you know, that's like a incredibly high level musical organization that I came into it kind of from, you know, a player's side and then sort of rock and roll side as far as like mixing. And that's where like I really had to cut my teeth both on the front of house side and on the studio side when you're dealing with like not only just the military end of things, but you're dealing with like national level events. You know, you're creating some soundtrack that's going to be used, you know, at the White House, or, you know, we've done stuff for the Olympics. We've done stuff for all the inaugurations. You know, did a HBO special. It was like 2009 for Obama's like pre-inaugural things. A big, like, you know, getting tossed into these circumstances with not only great players and then great, you know, older engineers that really were like, not to, I'll just say it. I don't give, you know, like I'm an old dude now. Like when I walked in there, I felt like a boy amongst men. And I was just like, these dudes have done supremely high profile recordings, national events. Like, yeah, where you're doing audio for the Olympics, that's kind of like, you know, you can't screw it up. You know, it is a no fail environment. So, you know, oh yeah, we'll chat, Rachel. But yeah, it's like, you know, getting all of that experience. And then here's an interesting thing. Like, so I retired in 2022, you know, it's coming off. And I think it's something we chatted a long time ago about, like, you know, I'm sitting there looking at like all of the albums and things that were released and TV stuff that were released. And that's kind of like, that's where like the Emmy came from, and the hundreds and hundreds of millions of streams. And then here I am still like, I'm starting over as a freelance dude. You know, there's no credits on there on any of those projects. You know, I've worked with like huge, like A-list, B-list, C-list artists that will come in as guests and features and whatever the case is. And it's like, you know, we're never too young or too old to start over, to keep learning, and you know, just to keep, you know, pushing that craft. I don't know. I kind of lost my old man train of thought, but
That's
you know,
cool. I like that.
Yeah.
You're like you said, starting over. You came out of something very prestigious, but
Oh yeah, for sure. And then nobody knows who you are. There's
you
another
built
guy,
that within.
HB. I want to link you up with. He's not on TikTok, but on Instagram. Mix Cave Mastering.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
his name is Craig. He was my boss, and he retired before I did. He's got a phenomenal mastering facility in Alexandria.
Oh,
You
okay,
know.
that'd be cool.
Yeah. But Yeah, that's like, we both sort of experienced the same thing, and but now there's a good network of people that I used to work with, and I did a session for the NSO, National Symphony, a couple of weeks ago, and it's like the guy who was the musical director on that gig does like the Kennedy Center honors, but he used to be in the Army as well as like one of the arrangers. I'm like, okay, so you're not totally starting over. There's a good series of contacts that are out there, but yeah, everything is all about like where you are, and then we're always starting over.
Absolutely.
You move to a different town, or you want to break into another genre. Somebody will be like, yeah, that's great. You've done a ton of hip hop, but have you done any polka? I don't know. Like,
Exactly.
No,
I don't know, man. This guy's a hip hop guy. I don't want to know if I don't want to work with him. It's a jazz project, and you always are like hustling to, promote yourself, but then like your musicianship and that stuff as well, for sure.
Yeah. No, I would love to connect, man, definitely, and I'm always open to it. So that'd be cool. We link up, and then definitely plug me with your guy too, and I'm always down for it.
Yeah. I like to keep stuff in the family, if you will, as far as like, projects, and if you're too busy for something, somebody else is too busy. Hey, I need a dude for this, a gal for that, whatever the case is. Like, somebody that plays, is a great B3 player. Like, cool. It's like make all that stuff work.
All right, gentlemen, I think we could probably call it. I know.
Yeah.
I know we all have business to attend to, but definitely appreciate it.
I'm glad we was able
time.
to connect, man, and then I'm glad I was able to get on, and
Awesome.
Yeah, man. Every Tuesday we got to do more HB. Like whenever you're available, man. Like please feel free to join, of course. And then anybody in the chat too, please give HB a follow. Of course, reference. If you're enjoying what we're speaking about, feel free to reach out to them. Don't be shy. As I tell the students in the class, you don't want to be that person sitting in the back of the class not saying anything, because you're going to be the one overlooked. So,
right.
Yeah. If you want something, feel free to reach out, y'all. All right. HB, Brian, appreciate it. Chat.
All right, y'all. Take it easy.
I know.